Cheaters often leave their search history unattended. Monkey branching, or moving from one relationship to another, is considered cheating. This happened to me about 10 months ago, just before our wedding. She got cold feet, and we almost called off the wedding. She expressed uncertainty about marriage without providing a clear reason. We talked a lot, and I gave her space, and she stayed with her parents for a few days. After a week or two of hesitation, we had a conversation, and she confirmed that she wanted to be together. We got married in the summer of 2021. A few months later, she started a new job, and she became interested in a guy she found funny. She shared many stories about him, and I started feeling uneasy. I met this guy once after work, and he gave off a bad vibe. A couple of weeks later, while I was working late, she was out with coworkers, and she stayed out longer than expected. We shared our locations on her phone. I got nervous when she didn't respond to my texts, so I checked her location, and she was at McDonald's for almost an hour. When she finally returned to my place, she sat outside for about half an hour. I took my dog out, and it turned out the guy drove her home. They were sitting in my driveway, chatting. I approached them, and she got out of the car. He tried to shake my hand when she came in. I told her that was totally unacceptable, and I didn't want them spending one-on-one time like that. She seemed remorseful, saying she overstepped a line and didn't mean anything by it. I believed her because prior to that, I had no reason to suspect any infidelity. A week or two later, toward the end of April, she went on a weekend trip to Colorado with friends who had moved there. When she came back, she was distant. I tried talking to her, but she went to bed early. 3 days later, on my second-to-last day at a difficult job, we went out for drinks after my shift, and I invited her. She came dressed in sweatpants, looking sloppy, acting quiet, not her usual bubbly self, and frankly, a bit rude. At the end of the night, when we got home, I asked her what was wrong. It was like pulling teeth. She finally said she didn't want to be together. I asked why, and she didn't really know. She didn't think we were a good fit. I kept asking her many questions. Is she a lesbian? Is there another guy? She said she didn't know what she wanted in life and couldn't imagine having kids with me if she wasn't certain. I stayed up all night trying to talk to her. She just fell asleep. The next morning, she left. Her Google account was logged in on my computer, and I found searches like, ended my marriage for another man. She searched for their astrological sign compatibility and song lyrics about the guy on Google in the past month. She came to get her stuff while I was at work, leaving only a Christmas mug that said, Joy. When we moved into our apartment, we found a sticky note on the wall that said, Yikes. We kept it up because it was a dingy apartment, and we thought it was funny. She thought it would be funny. Perhaps her affair partner found it amusing to leave the Joy mug on my counter with the Yikes sticker. I texted her to ask what that was about, and she simply said she thought it would be funny. The divorce was quick and easy, as it was uncontested due to our lack of children. She wasn't interested in keeping our dog, leaving me the apartment and most of my belongings. In that aspect, she showed mercy. During this process, I asked if she believed I wouldn't find out about her cheating. She denied cheating, and in response, I thanked her for leaving. I didn't know what kind of person she was, and I wouldn't want to be married to someone who behaves like she does. Someone who disrespects marriages, frequents strip clubs, and abandons their spouse. This is my first time sharing my story here. Since August, we've had no contact, and honestly, I don't think she cares. I'm slowly reaching a point where I don't care either. It took me a long time to move past the shock. My New Year's resolution is to leave her in the past, stop dwelling on her, and focus entirely on myself. Easier said than done. Since then, I've lost 20 pounds, hit the gym several times a week, and seen muscle gains. I joined a Bible study and attend church weekly. I traveled to Colorado with my brother and have now booked a trip to Europe. I had 6 weddings to attend this year, including my sister's. These were challenging given what happened, but I attended all of them. My new job has been great. I've had many dates, but I haven't found anyone I feel compatible with yet. I'm scared I won't find that person. Part of me is relieved she left. I'm not sure I would have had the strength to leave without knowing she was pursuing something else. If she was disrespectful enough to seek another relationship, she wasn't worth my time or effort. Update. Today is a significant day for all of us. Usually, I don't care much about New Year's, but after a tough year, we all deserve to feel excited about a new hope on the horizon. I hope that 2023 brings peace, healing, and happiness to everyone. My wish is that we all find strength within ourselves to move forward with curiosity and creativity, exploring new paths in our lives. On weekdays, let's practice perseverance and self-forgiveness. On strong days, let's embrace elation and joy. May we have the courage to venture into uncharted territories and the peace to confront our demons. Let's find the power to overcome them and spread love in every place and every face. I hope for authenticity, not only in those around us, but genuine authenticity to rediscover and showcase who we truly are. May 2023 be filled with adventure and growth. Let's climb out of this dreaded abyss and discover not only our true selves, but who we were meant to be. Leave the traitors in 2022. Those who are cowardly, inauthentic, and selfish can stay behind. Find gratitude for everything we have, even the lessons learned from betrayal. Lastly, leave behind the shackles in 2022. Delete remaining pictures and texts. Abandon the need for revenge, checking on people, externalized closure, anger, and sadness. Let's try to let go. Surrender to the present and embrace our destiny. Release the sinking ships to swim freely. Courageously look forward, spread our wings, and soar. This is my prayer for all of us in 2023. Happy New Year to my friends here. We have a community reaction. 7 lie-scoobed wishes all betrayed brighter days in 2023 and beyond. After enduring deep despair and betrayal, we deserve the best, seeking joy and light in our lives. Cheaters just don't fit with joy and light. They belong in the past. Second story. I've been married for 16 and a half years to my 21-year-old wife, and we've had our share of ups and downs. When I first met her, she was the nicest and kindest woman I'd ever encountered. Strangely enough, I told her she would be my wife just 2 minutes after meeting her. Our 2 kids mean the world to me. However, after our second child, she became distant, depressed, and changed. I assumed it was depression, but she refused to explore it and suggested couples counseling. During the recession, when money was tight, I was working 4 jobs and a side business just to make it another month. Affording counseling was challenging, especially when she wouldn't communicate. She'd have good and bad weeks, sometimes being great and other times mean and disrespectful. Eventually, when things stabilized, I urged her to go to counseling with me. Reluctantly, she agreed, but I don't think she enjoyed it. The counselor, however, echoed what I had been saying. I can't fix what I don't know. She requested more help around the house, which I provided. Since 2015, I've worked 3 jobs, managed household chores, and things improved for a while. Yet she became mean again, often snapping at our daughter. Concerned about the impact on our child, I told her I'd never divorce her, committed to making our marriage better for as long as it took. However, I think because my daughter is so much like me, she was taking her anger out on her, and I can't allow that. So if she wanted a divorce, that's what we do. The next day she said she wanted to try and make it work, and for a few years things were good. She even went to a doctor and got prescribed antidepressants, but insisted on the lowest dose. Fast forward to 2020, and she went right back to being mean and disrespectful. Worse, there was total disdain in her voice whenever she spoke to me, and a look of disgust whenever I showed up somewhere. It hurt. Closeness was never a problem with us, and we both seemed to enjoy each other. But when she'd get in those moods, she'd withhold. Still, I remained faithful, even though as a bartender, I had many offers. At one point, my sister assumed I had been cheating because she knew my wife wasn't close for so long. I told her I'd never do that, so now we're here. Last month, after a wedding, we were at a hotel, and I was hoping to fool around when she told me flat out, I don't want you. I think we should get divorced. We agreed to do it, but hold off until after the holidays for the kids. She fell asleep. 10 minutes later, I laid in bed with tears pouring down my face for 3 hours. I thought it was going to be the most pain I'd ever felt. Then there's today. A week ago, she had to go to a party for my daughter's softball team at midnight. She wasn't home, so I checked our Life 360 app, and she was at an Applebee's. Weird, but I thought she met her friend for a drink after. Thing is, she was there till 1, but they closed at 12. I asked where she went, and she said some bar with the people from the party. Never said Applebee's, which was strange. 2 days later, she said her boss told her she had to put a password on her phone because of work emails. Now, I was suspicious. Today, her mom called and asked if I could help her husband move a rug, so I went to help. When I was done, I stood outside and looked on the Life 360 app to see if she had left work. She had, so I decided to try something. My wife has a bad habit of needing to talk on the phone when she drives, so I called her. She was short and said she had to go because she was talking to her mom, who was standing right in front of me. Okay, I went home. When she got there, I asked how her mom was and if she had told her I had seen her today. She said she hadn't and asked where I saw her. I said, at her house. When I called you, her face dropped. She attempted to give some weak excuses, but eventually confessed that she had been seeing someone for a few months. So, before we decided to get a divorce, I was completely shocked. 10 minutes later, she acted as if nothing had happened. I'm not sure whether it was to avoid tipping off the kids or simply because she didn't care that she hurt me, but I suspect the latter. I couldn't talk to anyone about it because we've kept our decision to divorce a secret. So, my kids didn't catch wind of anything, and we had to attend the Christmas village tonight, so we were out all night. My kids sensed that something was wrong with me, but they just thought I was in a bad mood. My son even said, "You sound hurt. I'm unsure about what I'm going to do." The idea of divorce was already incredibly stressful, and I unintentionally lost 20 pounds in the past month. I need to figure out how to go through this without losing my house. Over the last 15 years, I've been paying off her $10,000 in credit card debt, $15,000 in student loans, and a $44,000 car. Now, I might owe her at least $40,000 for the house. It's going to be painful, but I believe I can handle it. I was finally starting to mentally prepare for the divorce, and then this betrayal hit me like a ton of bricks. In the last month, she's hurt me more than I ever thought possible. I don't even recognize the woman I married anymore. I don't know what to do. My daughter is going to be heartbroken when we tell her we're splitting up, but I'm unsure if I should tell her about this because I don't want her to hate her mom. I'm lost, confused, stressed beyond belief, and heartbroken. When I look at my wife, she seems like she couldn't care less. Thanks for listening. Update. It's still not finished, as expected, considering it's only been a few months. So, a week after my post, I discovered the guy's name while she was sending a Facebook message on her computer. Evidently, that's their only way of communicating, most likely because he's married with 3 kids. He's also a doctor and wealthy. That one really hit hard for a guy working 3 jobs to make ends meet. On Christmas, I found out she had informed her entire family, along with my sister and my cousin's wife, that we were divorcing. Meanwhile, I hadn't told anyone yet, fearing it might get back to my kids before the holidays were over. Her mom wasn't happy, thinking she was making the biggest mistake of her life, and the same went for my sister and her best friend. She didn't care. She also omitted the part about her cheating. Of course, I couldn't talk to her mom at Christmas because she was already starting to cry, and I didn't want to alert my kids, so I arranged to talk to her a few days later. The next day, my wife and I had a conversation. I told her I didn't want her seeing the guy until everything was settled. It was disrespectful, and if she wanted a divorce as friends, she shouldn't treat a friend like that. She agreed. Then we discussed how we divide things. I think I did okay. No alimony, no child support, 50-50 custody. We both provide clothes for the kids. Everything else is split equally. I'm keeping the house, but I have to pay her $43,000 in equity. In the end, she walked away with about $40,000. She owes her dad $10,000, an 800 credit score, and 0 debt. All thanks to me. When I finally spoke to her mom, I found out that when she learned we were going to talk, she came clean to her. Initially, she lied about cheating when her mom asked, then confessed after my mother-in-law was furious, really laid into her, then cried to me that she was scared I was going to cut her out of my life, which I assured her would never happen. Fast forward to mid-January. Now I've lost 40 pounds. I hit the gym every day to relieve stress. Now we have to break the news to my kids. I told her I wouldn't lie to my kids, but I wasn't going to just expose her either. I said if they asked, I'd try to guide the conversation a different way. She said she felt the same way. The thing is, I knew my daughter wouldn't buy into it. She's like a 14-year-old clone of me. She can spot BS a mile away. And that's exactly what happened. Before we even said anything, my daughter asked if we were getting divorced. When we sat them down, my wife said yes, and my kids lost it. Lots of crying. I saw them crying, and I started crying. Then my wife made a big mistake. She said, "Listen, we both want this." That's when my daughter let her have it, with everything she had. She yelled, "That's BS. My father would never want this. You want this. Look at him. He's crying. I've never seen him cry in my life. This is you." Then she asked if my wife was cheating on me. My wife tried to change the subject, but she wasn't having it. She grilled her while screaming, "Tell me the truth," over and over until my wife confessed. After that, it was like I could see her brain working. She started pointing out every red flag and made my wife confess to it. In 3 minutes, she got more out of her than I did in a month. Later, I had a one-on-one talk with my kids. My 12-year-old son just needed reassurance that things would be okay and change as little as possible. He's dreading when everything finally concludes. My daughter shared that she was crying for me, not herself, because of how hurt I had to be. I comforted her and made her feel better. Then she asked me to make her a promise, since I've never broken a promise to my kids. She requested me to promise that if, after all of this is over, my wife loses her new house and needs a place to stay for a while, I would let her stay here. Despite everything going on, she looked out for her mom. I couldn't refuse. When she talked to her mom, she asked her to promise to stop talking to the guy. However, she broke that promise after 2 weeks. Since then, she's been sneaking around and seeing him for short periods at places like Target. We had a major argument, and again she agreed to stop seeing him, even though she still talks to him. Apparently, she has developed feelings for him now. As I said, my daughter can't be fooled, so she'll eventually realize her mom broke that promise. There's no need for me to tell her right now. Currently, I'm in the process of refinancing my house, and she's searching for a house of her own, with her rich aunt co-signing for her. Hopefully, she'll find something soon. Also, one more thing, and I know this might be controversial. Yes, I have evidence. And yes, I know everything about this guy now, but I've decided not to tell his wife. I'm not proud to admit it, but my motives are entirely selfish and self-serving. The fact is, if I tell her, they might get divorced, and then when my wife leaves, she has a ready-made relationship waiting for her. A wealthy guy who, even after divorce, will still be rich, taking her on expensive dates, nice vacations, and helping with her bills. Meanwhile, I'll be struggling. As much as I want to hurt this guy, I want to hurt her more. When she leaves, her sneaking around is over, but his isn't. They won't be able to go on dates, and she'll see how much of a side piece she really is. They'll only be able to meet at her house, and he'll have to leave as soon as he's finished. He won't be giving her any money because it could tip off his wife. Now that she has feelings for him, she'll see if he's willing to leave his wife and family for her. I'm betting he won't, but if he does, fine. He'll have to be the one to have the courage to do it. I'm not going to do his dirty work for him. That's what happened with her rich aunt. She had an affair with a married man, the wife found out and left, and she moved right in, going from a broke single mom to a millionaire. That might happen with my wife, but I'm not going to help make it happen. Update. I assured my kids that I'd keep their lives as stable as possible, and I've stuck to that. In August, we finalized the divorce. While still here, she searched for houses but got outbid 16 times. I discovered a house nearby she liked, spoke to the owner, and he let her have it without other bids. It feels good knowing my kids are just 30 seconds away. The divorce agreement was a win for me. No alimony, no child support, 50-50 custody. I kept the house and paid her the equity, was able to refi before interest rates skyrocketed. Over the next few months, I refurnished my house, focused on my kids, and stayed positive. I continued going to the gym and working. It's been good. I've been friendly with her throughout, which put my kids at ease and helped them get used to everything. She even joined us for Thanksgiving and Christmas Eve at my sister's. People might think I'm crazy, but letting go of ill will and helping my kids celebrate the holidays normally makes me happy. Financially, I'm doing great. I'm unsure about her situation. She wasn't great at budgeting. We're supposed to split costs for the kids, but I end up covering more, which is fine. In December, I met a wonderful woman who lives an hour away, divorced with 2 kids. Due to the custody schedule, we see each other a few times a month, but she makes me happy. I don't know about my ex's dating life or if she's still seeing the guy. I know she's been with others, but I don't ask. One night she went out and got jumped, which, I won't lie, made me laugh. As for the guy she cheated with, I've told some mutual friends. One couple I have friends with saw him with his family at a function and started having a conversation in front of them where they mentioned my name and that I knew about the affair. They said I knew who the guy was but hadn't done anything yet. Then they started saying stuff like, "Man, if he decides to go after him, they won't find that guy's body for 50 years and crap like that." Just laughing and watching him sweat without letting on they knew it was him. I don't think my ex ever told him I knew about the affair, so that was probably a nice surprise for him. I'm sure I'll run into him eventually. Not sure how that will play out, but I'm not going out and seeking it. So, 16 months after D-Day, I have a new girlfriend, a great relationship with my kids, and a happy work life. Physically, I'm in great shape, and financially, I'm doing well. It couldn't have worked out better for me. For those going through it, stay positive. Don't let resentment take over. Work out a deal without lawyers if money is tight. Maintain an amicable relationship for your kids. Exercise to de-stress. And remember, every situation is different. Find the path that works for your situation. They're gone, and likely not coming back for your best interest. Trust is gone, so move on and find someone who deserves you. If you don't meet people often, try a dating app like Bumble. They work. Third story. My 37-year-old wife and I, a 38-year-old man, have been married for 13 years, but she had an affair for the past 2 years. I discovered this last week, the night before my grandmother's funeral. I never imagined my wife could deceive me like this, and it's breaking my heart. The husband of my wife's affair partner contacted me on Facebook Messenger to disclose the affair. I was 2 hours away in another state for the funeral, so I held myself together until after the funeral, and then drove home to confront my wife. I sensed that things between us weren't good in early 2021. I noticed a change in my husband's behavior and attitude, which I initially attributed to untreated depression following our dog's passing away in July 2020. He became less loving, we fought more, and he stopped helping around the house. He occasionally used hurtful language during arguments, creating a negative atmosphere at home. I only found relief when he was away for work. Frustrated and unhappy, I began considering leaving him around November 2021, feeling taken advantage of for all the responsibilities I shouldered in our home. Despite not having children, I worked full-time and managed 85% of the household chores. His main tasks, when not traveling for work, were playing with our dogs and doing his own laundry, while I handled the rest. During this time, my husband experienced strange physical pains and ailments, initially thinking he had a heart attack, but discovering it was a panic attack. These pains reappeared in different areas, including headaches, stomach aches, and rashes. Despite doctor clearance after tests, the pain would resurface in new forms. I suggested therapy for potential anxiety, depression, and hypochondria, but he refused, convinced he was dying of cancer, creating daily frustration. When the affair partner's husband contacted me, I realized my husband's supposed illnesses were likely a response to the guilt and stress from the affair. He carried on this affair for 2 years, having closeness during work trips and coordinating meetings at hotels. This happened twice, once paid by her and once by my husband on a credit card I couldn't access. They communicated through a fake Facebook Messenger account, exchanging explicit photos and sometimes having cyber relationship. After confronting him about the affair, my husband admitted to additional medical tests due to fears of contracting an STD, unknown to me. Our attachment declined since 2021 as he feared transmitting something to me. I'm devastated not only by the affair, but also by how he treated me during these 2 years. I feel betrayed and taken advantage of for maintaining our home while working. Although we moved states around May this year, no longer living near the woman, they remained in contact. They met in early December during her work trip to our new area. My husband claims they only talked in the car, refusing a hotel, and her story aligns with his. I'm incredibly upset and hurt, crying every day and struggling to eat. This morning, I scheduled an appointment next week to see a therapist and a divorce attorney consultation in the upcoming weeks. My husband is saying sorry, claiming he'll do anything to keep me and be a better spouse. He's been shedding tears, using the typical lines you often hear when someone gets caught. Although he insists I'm not to blame, he can't provide a reason for the affair. I find it challenging to overcome not only the lying and deception, but also how I was mistreated for nearly 2 years. 6 months ago, I suggested marriage counseling, and he responded by telling me I needed therapy. Fortunately, I have the support of my family and some close, trusted friends. However, I live thousands of miles away from everyone, so I feel alone in this. We recently bought our home last year when we moved, and I'm uncertain about the cost of getting out of this mortgage. Due to my grandmother's passing, I am set to inherit a decent amount of money, slightly more than my annual income, in about 6 to 8 weeks when we finalize her accounts. I won't be putting this money in any account with his name or access. I plan to inform the attorney I'm consulting with about this financial aspect. Over the last 2 years, I feel like I've been worn down, and this affair has now completely shattered me. While I believe I can handle this on my own, I've spent 15 years with this person, supposed to be my best friend. I've prioritized his career over mine, relocating across the country for him. I'm scared of making the wrong decision, but my gut feeling tells me to leave this deceitful person.
The first time I met Brianna was at a coffee shop just off campus. I was a sophomore working part-time as a barista, juggling my studies with the demands of earning enough to stay afloat. She walked in with an air of confidence, her laughter filling the small space as she joked with a friend. I couldn't help but notice her vibrant energy. When she ordered a chai latte, I accidentally gave her a cappuccino instead, leading to an awkward exchange that ended with her smiling and saying, "I'll give you a pass, this time." That chance encounter turned into more. We kept bumping into each other at campus events, and I finally mustered the courage to ask her out. Our first date was nothing glamorous, just burgers at a local diner and a late-night walk by the lake. But it was perfect. Brianna was studying criminal justice, her dream to work in law driving her determination. I was captivated by her ambition and her ability to make me laugh until my sides hurt. By the time we graduated, we'd become inseparable. I secured an entry-level role at a publishing house, and Brianna found a position at a law firm. We worked long hours and lived in a tiny apartment with creaky floors and peeling wallpaper, but we were happy. It was during those years that we built the foundation of our life together. Long talks about our dreams, late-night dinners of cheap takeout, and laughter that echoed through those shabby walls. When our first child was born, life shifted in ways we couldn't have imagined. I remember holding her hand as she gave birth, marveling at her strength and the new chapter unfolding before us. Brianna temporarily stepped back from her career, pouring herself into motherhood while I climbed the corporate ladder. Despite the sleepless nights and endless diapers, we were a team, balancing the chaos with love and unwavering support for one another. As our family grew, so did the demands on our time and energy. We moved into a modest house, gradually transforming it into a home filled with memories. Brianna returned to work once our youngest started kindergarten, excelling as a paralegal. Watching her thrive professionally while managing our family with grace only deepened my admiration for her. Our days were hectic, but we always made time for each other, weekly date nights and summer vacations where we'd reconnect away from the noise of everyday life. Looking back now, I realize those early years were filled with milestones that shaped us. Every triumph, every challenge, and every compromise brought us closer. We'd weathered storms before, financial stress, career shifts, and raising children. But nothing had prepared me for the crossroads we were about to face. The signs had been there, subtle yet persistent, but I was too blind to acknowledge them. For several weeks, the clues had been right before me, yet I failed to see them. My wife, Brianna, had begun lavishing me with an unusual amount of care and attention. Instead of the usual quick toast and coffee in the mornings, she started preparing elaborate breakfasts. Evening meals became a celebration of my favorite dishes, often accompanied by wine. She'd then appear in new lingerie, shower me with affection, and entice me to bed earlier than usual. Did I question this transformation in our 24 years together? Not at all. I welcomed the change as a refreshing turn in our routine. After our youngest child left for college a few months ago, I resolved to show Brianna how much I appreciated her. I made it a point to be home by 5 every evening. We began enjoying upscale dinners, attending local theater shows, and even tried dancing. a hobby we hadn't explored in years. I brought her flowers regularly and eagerly embraced this new phase of our empty nest lifestyle. My name is Tyler Winslow, though everyone calls me Ty. My wife, Brianna, Bree for short, and I had been married for almost 25 years. Like any relationship, we had our ups and downs, but the good times far outweighed the challenges. I was content with our life. I work as a senior director at a major publishing house, having climbed the ladder over 2 decades. My expertise spans every aspect of publishing: reviewing manuscripts, working with authors, coordinating with designers, negotiating contracts, managing budgets, and overseeing marketing and film rights. Introducing new authors and their books to the world has always been a point of pride for me. Brianna, nearly 45 years old and stunningly beautiful, has a career of her own. Thanks to good genes, a healthy lifestyle, and proper nutrition, we've both aged gracefully. People often compliment us as a striking couple. Since our youngest started kindergarten, Bree has been working as a paralegal at the prestigious law firm Thomas, Dixon & Harris. Over time, she was promoted to manage the paralegal team, overseeing assignments and workflow for the entire department. Everything changed last Wednesday. I came home as usual around 5 p.m. and found Bree in the kitchen, preparing dinner. For weeks now, her meals had been more elaborate and thoughtful than ever before. I kissed the back of her head as I walked in. Typically, Bree would turn to kiss me properly, but this time she didn't. "No grand welcome kiss for me today?" I teased. She responded without looking up. "I'm just glad you're home." Her tone felt distant, as if she was avoiding even a brief moment of connection. "Is something wrong?" I asked. "Nothing at all," she replied quickly. "Go change, and I'll have a glass of your favorite wine ready when you come back down." Though her response felt dismissive, I brushed off my unease and went upstairs. After hanging up my suit and tossing my shirt in the laundry basket, I changed into more comfortable clothes, a pair of Dockers and a sweatshirt. Dinner that night wasn't extravagant, but it was clear she'd put thought into it. We started with a simple salad of lettuce and tomatoes, followed by a main course of roasted pork served over cauliflower rice. As we toasted with glasses of wine, Bree looked at me and said, "You know I love you, right?" There was something different in her voice. This wasn't the usual casual "I love you" we exchanged daily. I nodded, replying, "And I love you too." After dinner, we cleared the table as usual. I loaded the dishwasher while Bree stored the leftovers. She excused herself to go upstairs and change into something more comfortable. Anticipating another romantic evening, I eagerly followed her lead. When I entered the dimly lit living room, I saw Bree reclining on the sofa in a revealing negligee that barely covered her. Her beauty took my breath away. Without hesitation, I knelt by the sofa and kissed her deeply. The moment was electric. My kisses trailed from her lips to her bare shoulders, and soon her negligee slipped off, exposing her chest. Her figure was stunning, and I couldn't help but admire her, as if for the first time. "You love me, don't you, Ty?" she whispered. "You'll always love me no matter what?" "Of course," I assured her without hesitation. I quickly undressed and joined her on the sofa, where our passion ignited once more. Half an hour later, we lay entwined, savoring the afterglow. That night, she seemed more fervent than ever. "It feels so good to rediscover the spark we've missed over the years," I said, kissing her gently. Our conversation drifted to compliments about how well we both maintained ourselves over the years. I teased that she could easily pass for someone in her early 30s, while she playfully ran her hand over my abs, praising my fitness. Just as I was drifting off, Bree's voice pulled me back. "Honey, there's something I need to tell you," she said softly. "Anything," I murmured, still half asleep. "You know how much I love you, right?" Her voice was barely audible. "Yes, and I love you just as much," I replied. She hesitated before continuing. "Darling," she began carefully, "this Friday I've made plans to meet someone from my office for the night." Her words hung in the air for a moment before they truly registered. When they did, I stood up abruptly and locked eyes with her. "What is this?" I asked, my voice firm. She tried to pull me back down, urging my head to rest on her chest again, but I resisted. "No, seriously, what are you talking about?" I pressed. "It doesn't change anything about how we feel for each other," she said softly. "I'll still love you, and you'll still love me." I blinked, taken aback. "You can't be serious. Is this some kind of joke?" She shook her head. "No, Ty, I'm not joking. I have a date this Saturday with a man from my office. We're going out for dinner and dancing. After that, we'll go to his hotel room and I'll spend the night with him. I'll be back home late Sunday morning. I stared at her, stunned. So what you're really saying is that you're planning to spend Saturday night and Sunday morning sleeping with some guy? Don't put it like that, she said, frowning. That's crude and unnecessary. He's a good man and I like him. The shock jolted me fully awake. I began pulling on my clothes, signaling that our moment of closeness was over. It was clear to her that I was furious. Ty, please don't react this way, she pleaded. I still love you and you still love me. It's just this one time, and then it'll be over. In a week, everything will go back to the way it was and you'll forget about it. Forget about it? I snapped, disbelief dripping from my words. Who is this guy, Bree? Why are you trying to ruin everything we've built now when things are so good? She tightened the sash of her satin robe and replied, His name doesn't matter. It's not something you need to know, and I don't want you doing anything reckless. Besides, he's bigger than you, and he could hurt you if it came to that. Oh, trust me, I shot back. With my rage and a baseball bat, he wouldn't stand a chance. She sighed. It's just one night, Ty. He's leaving for New York on Sunday evening for good. He won't be back. He better leave, I growled, because if he doesn't, the next time he walks into court, it'll be on crutches. As my initial rage simmered, a deep sense of loss began to set in. Bree and I had been together for over 2 decades. She was my first and only lover. Temptations had come and gone, but I'd never acted on them. Now, this? How long has this been going on? I demanded. It's not a thing, she said, avoiding my gaze. We've barely touched. What does that even mean? Holding hands? Hugging? Kissing? Or more? I pressed, needing clarity. She stayed silent, which only confirmed my worst fears. If it had been something less passionate, she would have admitted it outright. Finally, she explained, he came to our firm about 6 months ago from a top New York law office to assist with a complex tax case. I worked closely with him, research, charts, graphs for court. Over time, we became close. 2 months ago, he told me he had feelings for me and wanted to sleep with me. But I didn't want to sneak off to some cheap motel or do something inappropriate at work. This was different. It needed to be special. He suggested I find a way to take a night away. I told him I couldn't lie to you. He asked if you might allow it just once. I wasn't sure, but I hoped you'd understand that this would only be a one-time thing and wouldn't change anything between us. Why? I demanded. Why would you risk everything we have? We're happy. We love each other. We have an incredible marriage, amazing kids, no financial worries, and our health. Why would you jeopardize that? She hesitated. Because my friend made me realize I've only ever been with you. He showed me what I might be missing. I just want to know what it's like. This will be enough. It'll make me feel whole. He cares about me, and I care about him. It's not some tawdry affair. But Bree, I protested, we have something rare and beautiful. You're the only woman I've ever been with, and I thought I was the only man you'd ever been with. You don't understand, she said, her voice trembling. I need this. I want this. I want him. Why? I asked, desperate for a reason. She sighed deeply. He's so attractive, Ty. He's younger than me, but still finds me irresistible. I'm drawn to him in a way I can't explain. I just need to experience this, or I'll regret it forever. He feels the same way. Please, let me do this. Afterward, I'll be yours completely. I'll never agree to this, I replied firmly. It'll destroy us, Bree. It'll ruin our marriage. No, it won't, she insisted. Once it's over, I'll be the best wife you can imagine. I'll cook for you, keep the house immaculate, do the laundry, the shopping, everything. I'll be the perfect partner in every way, including the bedroom. You can have me anytime, however you want. I'll treat you like a king for the rest of our lives. I promise I'll never touch another man again. And I'll have to live with the fact that my wife slept with another man, I said bitterly. Do you know how humiliating that is for a man? It's the ultimate betrayal. You'll have to accept it, she said firmly. I'm going to do this, Ty. I need to. It won't change anything between us. You'll still love me, and I'll still love you. So that's what all the affection and attention over the last 2 months was about, I said coldly. It wasn't about us becoming empty nesters. You were trying to soften me up so I wouldn't push back on this insane idea. Well, guess what, Bree? That's not going to happen. Bree stood firm, unmoved by any of my arguments or objections. Her mind was made up and she wasn't going to reconsider. I didn't resort to pleading. She would have to deal with the fallout of her choices, whatever that might mean. I didn't yet know what consequences lay ahead. I went to our bedroom, packed a few items I'd need for the next day, grabbed my toiletries, and relocated to the guest room, which had its own attached bathroom in our spacious home. As I was moving my belongings, Bree tried to stop me. "Don't do this, Ty," she said. "Nothing's going to change. I know you're upset now, but by Sunday afternoon, this will all be behind us. We'll go back to being us." I paused, meeting her gaze. "I'm not just upset, Bree," I replied, keeping my tone calm but resolute. "If you go through with this, we'll never be us again." I closed the guest room door without waiting for her response. Inside, I was left alone with my thoughts, which swirled chaotically. I considered all the possible responses: divorce, moving out, demanding that Bree leave, physically stopping her from going, even telling her parents or our kids. But none of these options felt right. I couldn't bring myself to divorce her. I still loved her, despite her lapse in judgment. I wasn't about to leave my own home either, and evicting her, while tempting, felt extreme. I also doubted that involving her family or ours would solve anything. If Bree chose to call off her plans, it needed to be her decision, not one coerced by outside pressure. Otherwise, it might just push her into being more secretive in the future. It was Thursday evening, and it was clear that Bree had waited until the last minute to tell me. This tactic limited the time I had to process, respond, or try to prevent her from following through. I was terrified. She admitted to having feelings for this man, and I couldn't help but wonder, was she considering leaving me now that the kids were out of the house? The thought shattered me. What if she found their night together more satisfying than our closeness? What if this opened the door to more? For 25 years, Bree and I had shared a comfortable, familiar closeness. There weren't many surprises left in our physical relationship, but I still found her incredibly attractive. Whether she wore a sleek black dress, a hot negligee, or just a towel, her body had never stopped exciting me. But now, as much as I feared the future, I started to consider ways to stop her. Could I somehow prevent her from going through with this? If her Prince Charming left town before they met, I'd have time to remind her of what she was risking. And maybe, just maybe, I could make sure she never entertained an idea like this again. Before I finally fell asleep late that night, I devised a plan. Talking Bree out of her decision seemed impossible, but perhaps her employer could intervene. I knew that Thomas, Dixon, and Harris, the law firm where Bree worked, had strict rules against workplace relationships. If I spoke to one of the senior partners about her situation, they might confront her about how her actions could affect her career. The next morning, I woke up first. Normally, I'd brew coffee for Bree before leaving for work, but not today. When she greeted me with a hesitant, "Good morning," I didn't reply in kind. All I said was, "Don't do this," before leaving the house without our usual goodbye kiss. I knew she noticed the shift in my behavior. Later that morning, I drove downtown to the offices of Thomas, Dixon, and Harris. Their firm occupied the top floor of a modern skyscraper. The reception area was as sleek and impressive as I remembered from past events, an open layout with plush seating, a fully stocked bar, and walls adorned with tasteful artwork. Seated at the central reception desk was Emily Stratton, the firm's office manager. Emily and I had crossed paths many times over the years at local events, and while we weren't close, we were friendly acquaintances. Despite being in her mid-50s, Emily carried herself with grace and poise. Her conservative attire never drew attention to her figure, but she had an understated elegance that didn't go unnoticed. With her golden hair always pulled into a bun and glasses perched on her nose, she exuded professionalism. Emily's face lit up when she saw me walk in. "Tyler, what a nice surprise," she said warmly, stepping out from behind her desk to greet me. She gave me a quick hug, her cheerful demeanor temporarily lifting my gloom. "Emily," I said with a faint smile, "I need to speak with Mr. Thomas. It's personal and important." Her expression grew serious. "This is about Brianna, isn't it?" she asked perceptively. I hesitated before answering vaguely. "Maybe." Emily nodded knowingly and adjusted her glasses. "Mr. Thomas is just finishing up a meeting," she said, checking his schedule. "He has about half an hour before he heads out for lunch with clients." "I'll make sure he has a moment to talk with you." I thanked her and took a seat in the waiting area. A few minutes later, Emily brought me a cup of coffee. "I added a splash of Bailey's," she said with a wink. "You look like you need it." Her gesture of kindness brought a faint smile to my face, but my mind was still focused on the difficult conversation ahead. I only hoped that William Thomas could help me stop Bree before it was too late. Moments later, the intercom on Emily's desk buzzed. "I'm back in my office, Emily," came Mr. Thomas's voice. Emily seized the opportunity. "Mr. Thomas, Tyler Winslow is here. He's hoping to speak with you for a few minutes. It's important." There was a brief pause. Mr. Thomas replied thoughtfully. "If you think it's worth my time, send him in. I can spare about 5 minutes before my next appointment." Emily guided me through a pair of glass doors, down a short hallway, and to a large, intricately carved wooden door. She opened it, gesturing for me to step inside, and then closed it quietly behind me. The office was impressive, spacious and meticulously arranged. Mr. Thomas stood near his expansive desk, which was flanked by several chairs. On the opposite side of the room, a comfortable sitting area featured a sofa, an armchair, and a coffee table. The walls were adorned with framed degrees, awards, and plaques underscoring his success. He stepped around the desk, extending his hand warmly. "Tyler, good to see you. How's life? Still in publishing?" "I'm doing okay," I replied, though my tone lacked enthusiasm. "Well, if Emily thinks it's important, it must be. What's on your mind?" As I stood there, I hesitated. The weight of the conversation suddenly felt overwhelming. Still, I forced myself to begin. "I hate to bring this to you, Mr. Thomas. Honestly, it's embarrassing." "What's going on, Ty?" he asked, his tone both curious and sincere. I took a deep breath. "My wife, Brianna, works here. She's told me she plans to spend Saturday night with one of your associates. I've tried everything to dissuade her, but she's adamant." Mr. Thomas, ever the sharp lawyer, grasped the situation immediately. "So, you're hoping I can step in? Maybe have a word with Brianna or this associate?" "That was my intention when I came here," I admitted. "But now I think I've made a mistake. This is my problem, and I need to handle it myself." He nodded slowly, considering my words. "You're aware, of course, that our firm has policies about workplace relationships, especially within the same department. Those policies exist to protect us from potential issues like conflicts of interest or legal liability." "Yes, I'm aware," I said quietly. Placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder, he continued. "Our fraternization policy isn't as robust as it should be. I've been meaning to tighten it, add clear consequences for violations. Unfortunately, I can't rewrite policy overnight, and certainly not before Saturday." I nodded, feeling a mix of frustration and resignation. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Thomas. I'm sorry to have bothered you with this. I need to figure out how to deal with it on my own." "Good luck, Ty," he said as I turned to leave. I stepped back into the reception area, where Emily was waiting with a curious look. "How did it go?" she asked. "It was a mistake to bring this to him," I admitted. "I feel foolish." Emily gave me a kind smile. "You're being too hard on yourself. Sit down and take a moment. I'll bring you another coffee or something stronger if you'd prefer." I sank into one of the plush chairs in the waiting area, running my hands over my face as my thoughts raced. I felt defeated, completely out of options. Bree seemed determined to go through with her plans, and I didn't know how to stop her. Overwhelmed, I leaned forward, my head in my hands. Emily's cheerful voice broke through my despair. "Come on, Ty, let's go to lunch. My treat." I hesitated, but the idea of stepping away and clearing my head was appealing. I agreed, and Emily arranged for a colleague to cover for her while she took an extended break. As we walked to a nearby restaurant she liked, she linked her arm with mine in a gesture of support. Over iced tea, Emily gently encouraged me to open up. I hesitated, but eventually I told her everything. She listened quietly, nodding at the right moments. After we ordered, she chose soup and half a sandwich while I picked at a Caesar salad. Our conversation shifted to lighter topics. When we finished eating, Emily ordered coffee for both of us, and we sat in companionable silence for a while. Then Emily broke the silence with something unexpected. "Did you know my late husband was a fighter pilot?" "I knew you were widowed," I replied, "but I didn't know he was a pilot." Her expression softened. "Joe was my hero. We married right after he graduated from the Air Force Academy. He flew A-10S, the Warthog, as they call it. He served 2 tours in the Middle East before he was tragically eliminated in a training accident." I listened as she recounted his service, including the honors he received: the Silver Star, the Distinguished Flying Cross, and 2 Bronze Stars. Her voice wavered slightly as she spoke, but there was pride in her words. "Joe used to tell me about air combat strategies," she continued. "One scenario stuck with me. When facing a single enemy fighter, a 2-plane formation would split up. The enemy had to pick a target, pursue one, and leave the other free to attack, or try to target both and fail. Either way, the enemy lost." Emily's story intrigued me, though I wasn't sure what she was driving at. Are you talking about Bree's date? I asked. She smiled, her eyes sharp with meaning. Give her a choice, Ty. No matter what she chooses, make sure you win. Her words hung in the air as she reached across the table, gently taking my hand. Her smile was disarming, filled with quiet encouragement, and for the first time that day, I felt a glimmer of hope. After lunch with Emily, I went back to the office, immersing myself in work to avoid going home to Bree. The thought of spending an evening in her company, pretending everything was normal, felt unbearable. Later, I stopped by the Iris Club, a cozy spot where I could enjoy a few drinks with friends and momentarily distract myself. It was almost 10 p.m. when I finally returned home, and Bree was waiting for me, her frustration evident. "You didn't even bother to call," she said, her tone sharp. "I went out of my way to make a nice dinner for us. It's sitting in the fridge. I was hoping we could spend some time together tonight, maybe even reconnect. And now I can smell the booze on you." "Yes, I had a few drinks," I replied bluntly. "I stayed out because I didn't want to face this situation tonight. I needed to forget, just for a little while, about what you're planning tomorrow." I headed toward the guest room without waiting for her response. "I'm tired and going to bed." Her voice followed me down the hallway. "Don't worry, Ty. Tomorrow will come and go, and this will all be behind us. We'll go back to how things were before." I didn't reply. I simply shut the door, stripped to my boxers, and collapsed onto the guest bed, exhaustion and frustration weighing heavily on me. The next morning, I was up early. I downed a quick breakfast, just coffee and toast, and headed outside to work on the yard. Mowing the lawn, pulling weeds, and tidying up the space gave me something to focus on. When I came back inside, sweaty and tired, Bree was getting ready to head out. "I've got a spa appointment," she announced nonchalantly. "Manicure, pedicure, the whole thing. I'll be back in a few hours." I leaned against the kitchen counter, watching her. "Bree, don't do this," I said quietly but firmly. "It won't end the way you think it will." She paused briefly but didn't respond, disappearing through the door and leaving me alone once again. When she returned later that afternoon, it was clear she'd gone all out. Her hair was pinned up in an elegant style, her nails painted a bold, vibrant red. She looked radiant, too radiant. I could tell she was preparing for something special. Meanwhile, I'd been busy as well. The living room had been transformed, the furniture rearranged, and the rug rolled up to reveal an open space. Bree stopped in her tracks, taking in the room. "What's going on, Ty? Why is the rug rolled up, and why is the coffee table pushed to the side?" "I made room for dancing," I said casually. "I thought we could have a romantic evening together." She crossed her arms, skepticism etched across her face. "What are you trying to pull?" "Nothing underhanded," I replied. "I just want to show you that staying home tonight would be the better choice. Let me show you something." I gestured toward the dining room. Reluctantly, she followed me. I'd set the table with meticulous care, using our best china, crystal glasses, and silver flatware. A bouquet of roses sat in the center, flanked by 2 tall candles, their warm glow creating an passionate atmosphere. It was the kind of table you'd find in a high-end restaurant. "Ty," she said slowly, her voice firm, "I see what you're doing, but it's not going to work. You know I already have plans tonight." "I know what your plans are," I said evenly. "But plans can change. Sometimes something better comes along. Are you really going to disappoint me for him?" "Ty, don't do this to yourself," she said, shaking her head. Ignoring her words, I led her to the kitchen where the evening's menu was already underway. "Let me walk you through what I've prepared," I began. "We'll start with a chilled green gazpacho, garnished with chopped yellow tomatoes and cucumber. Then, a crisp salad of iceberg lettuce with avocado and bacon, drizzled with ranch dressing. To cleanse the palate, I've made a lime sorbet." "Ty, stop," she said softly. "You're putting so much effort into this, and it's not going to change my mind," I continued, undeterred. "The main course is a pork chop stuffed with rice and herbs, finished with a béarnaise sauce. On the side, asparagus sautéed with garlic butter and creamy potato gratin. For dessert, a scoop of vanilla ice cream with green crème de menthe. We'll finish with coffee and your choice of liqueur." Bree sighed, exasperation mingled with guilt. "It sounds amazing, but I'm leaving tonight. I even bought a new dress for the occasion." She turned and headed upstairs. I heard the shower running as I went to our bedroom to change. I put on a pair of black pants, a fitted black shirt, and leather dance shoes. A formal suit seemed unnecessary for a dinner at home. When Bree came downstairs, my heart sank. She was stunning. Her black dress hugged her figure perfectly, with a neckline that drew attention to her décolletage. The hemline stopped modestly above her knees, but the slit along the side climbed daringly high, revealing a glimpse of her stocking tops as she moved. Her heels, adorned with delicate diamond-studded straps, added the finishing touch. "How do I look?" she asked, spinning slightly to show off the ensemble. Anger simmered beneath the surface, but I kept my tone calm. "You look incredible," I said, forcing a tight smile. "Like you're dressed to impress someone, but not me." "It's a special night, Ty. I wanted to look my best. Don't worry, I'll wear this for you another time," she said dismissively, walking past me toward the door. As I flipped through the radio stations, George Michael's Careless Whisper came on, a song that always pulled at my emotions. I turned up the volume, letting the familiar melody wash over me. "Can I have one last dance before you go?" I asked softly. Bree hesitated for a moment, then gave a reluctant nod. "All right, just one." I walked over, gently took her hand, and pulled her into a slow embrace. We swayed to the rhythm, her body close against mine. The scent of her perfume was achingly familiar, stirring memories of better times. "You're wearing English leather," she murmured, a faint smile on her lips. "I know it's your favorite," I replied. As the song reached its final verses, I trailed soft kisses along her cheek and down her neck. She sighed, her response almost instinctive, a gentle sound of contentment. Encouraged, I slid my hand to the strap of her dress, easing it off her shoulder while kissing her neck. She froze, pulling back abruptly. "No, Ty, don't. You know I'm leaving tonight. We can do this another time." I held her gaze for a moment, my voice low and steady. "It's not too late to change your mind." Her expression hardened. "I'm not changing my plans, Ty. I told you I'm going on this date, and I don't want you to ruin it." Exhaling slowly, I stepped back. "All right, Bree, I won't interfere anymore. You've made your choice, and I see it's final. But before you walk out that door, there are two things I want you to do." Suspicion flickered across her face. "What are they?" "First," I said, gesturing toward the dining room, "I want you to see what I've done. Look at the table I set for us tonight. I want you to remember it as you walk out." I lit the candles and dimmed the lights, bathing the room in a soft golden glow. The scene was passionate and romantic, a picture of what could have been. Bree glanced at the setup and shrugged. "We can have a romantic dinner another time, Ty." I stepped closer, took her left hand, and carefully slid off her wedding and engagement rings. "Second, I don't want you touching him while wearing the rings I gave you. These are symbols of us, and you're choosing to leave them behind tonight." Her eyes widened slightly as I placed the rings, along with my own wedding band, on the small hallway table. For a moment, she looked uncomfortable, even guilty. "Okay," she said quietly. As Bree reached for her shawl and clutch, the doorbell rang. Both of us turned toward the sound, surprised. Through the frosted glass, a figure stood silhouetted. "Who could that be at this hour?" she muttered, moving to open the door. When she did, her voice caught in a mix of surprise and confusion. "Emily? What are you doing here?" I stepped forward, taking Emily's hand and guiding her inside. Bree's eyes darted to Emily's outfit, a striking cocktail dress far removed from her usual conservative work attire. The scarlet dress clung to Emily's curves, with off-the-shoulder straps tied in delicate bows. Her legs were accentuated by French-style red stockings, and her updo was decorated with a ribbon matching her dress. "Ty invited me," Emily said smoothly, her gaze drifting to the candlelit dining table. "He promised me an evening of romance, dinner by candlelight, slow dancing, and cozying up by the fireplace. How could I say no?" Bree's expression shifted from shock to disbelief. "You look so different from how you dress at work," she blurted out. Emily smirked, adjusting the strap of her dress. "I like to dress up for special occasions. And you look stunning, too. That dress will be fun for Stanley to take off." Bree froze. "Stanley? How do you know about him?" Emily laughed lightly, her tone almost mocking. "Oh, everyone in the paralegal department knows about Stanley. The tax department, too. Stanley isn't exactly subtle." Bree's cheeks flushed. "We tried to be discreet." "Discreet?" Emily interrupted with a laugh. "From the moment Stanley arrived, he made his intentions obvious, and you didn't resist. Shorter skirts, plunging necklines, more makeup, and his favorite perfume. Honestly, you were an open book." Bree looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was supposed to be harmless, just a little flirting. Then I got caught up in it. I thought it would be just one night. I stepped forward, draping her shawl over her shoulders and guiding her toward the door. "One night, huh? Fine. Go, but don't come back until tomorrow morning. I've given you every chance to stay with me, but you chose him." Bree hesitated for a moment, her face a mix of guilt and defiance. "I'll be back," she said quietly as she stepped onto the porch. "Have fun tonight," I said, closing the door behind her. For a moment, I stood in silence, hearing her car pull away. My chest felt heavy with the weight of what had just happened. Things would never be the same again. Emily approached, her expression softening. "I can't imagine how you feel, Ty," she said gently. "But remember, no matter what choice Bree makes, you've already won." She reached up, cupping my face in her hands. Her lips met mine, a gentle, reassuring kiss that slowly deepened. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her closer as the kiss became more passionate. When we finally pulled apart, both of us were breathing heavily. "Let's not waste the evening," Emily said with a small smile. "Show me this dinner you've prepared." I told Emily that dinner wasn't quite ready, but invited her to help if she felt like it. She agreed with a smile, following me into the kitchen. I pointed to 3 open bottles of wine, a crisp Chardonnay, a bold Cabernet, and a sweeter dessert option. She chose the Chardonnay. After pouring her a glass and tasting it myself, I playfully slipped an apron over her head and tied it around her waist. Standing behind her, I gave her a quick kiss, which made her laugh. "What's my assignment, chef?" she asked, clearly enjoying herself. "I've already baked half a pound of bacon," I said. "I need you to cut 5 strips into 1-inch pieces and mix them with the chopped iceberg lettuce. Then, dice the avocado and add it to the mix." While Emily worked, sipping her wine and chatting lightly, a sudden wave of self-doubt crept in. I glanced at her, the most stunning woman I'd ever been close to, and couldn't shake the thought that I might not measure up. My entire life I'd only been with one woman, Bree, while Emily might have had far more experience. The thought unnerved me. I stepped up behind her, gently placing my hands on her waist. "I've only ever made love to Bree," I confessed quietly. "It makes me worry that I won't be good enough for you." Emily paused and leaned back against me, her tone reassuring. "Ty, you have nothing to worry about. Just treat me the way you'd treat Bree, and let's see where it goes. If I want something different, I'll tell you, and if there's something you want, just say so. Whatever it is." She turned her head slightly and added with a playful smile, "And, by the way, I love foreplay." I kissed the back of her head, feeling a flicker of confidence return. "Thanks. Have you ever been a cheerleader? You sure know how to inspire someone." She laughed. "The salad's done," she announced, taking the bowl into the dining room. I followed, pulling out her chair and helping her sit before taking my own seat at the head of the table. Before starting, I refilled our glasses and raised mine for a toast. "To an unforgettable night," she said, her eyes sparkling. "I'll drink to that," I replied. Dinner unfolded beautifully. I served each course, and Emily complimented every dish, calling it a 5-star meal that could rival any fine dining experience. When dessert was finished, I told her to relax in the family room while I tidied up. Once the dining area was spotless, I joined her. The soft sounds of rain and distant thunder played on the stereo, creating a soothing backdrop. Emily was gently swaying to the music, lost in the moment. When I approached, she held out her hands, inviting me to dance. We moved together slowly, the closeness of the moment deepening. "This is perfect, Ty," she murmured. "It's been so long since I felt this romantic." "I feel the same," I admitted. After a moment of silence, she added, "For what it's worth, I haven't been with a man in years. And when I have, it's only been with men I truly liked. I really like you, Ty." "That's good to know," I said, pulling her a little closer. "If I tell you I love you at some point tonight, don't be mad. I'll mean it, at least for as long as we're together. And when this ends, I hope we can stay close." The music slowed, and so did we, eventually just holding each other. Her arms were around my neck, mine resting on her waist. Her breath was warm against my skin as she ran her fingers through the hair at the back of my neck. I felt her body pressed against mine, her curves, her warmth. She must have felt my reaction, too. I leaned down and began to kiss her neck and collarbone, savoring her soft sighs. As the moment intensified, Emily gently stepped back. "Give me a few minutes to change into something more comfortable," she said with a teasing smile. "Feel free to do the same. Let's meet by the fireplace." I went to my room, slipping into black silk pajama pants and a matching t-shirt. Pouring myself a coffee with a splash of Bailey's, I settled on the couch to wait. A few minutes later, I heard her approach. Before I could turn, Emily's arms wrapped around the back of the couch. Her hands slid under my shirt, and she kissed my neck, sending a jolt of warmth through me. I turned onto my back, looking up at her. She stood there in a black satin robe, the fabric loosely tied at the waist. Beneath it, I could see the delicate lace of a negligee. Her hair was down, framing her face, and her legs were bare. I reached for her hand, pulling her over the back of the couch. She landed on me with a laugh, her robe parting slightly. I couldn't resist leaning up to kiss her. What started as a gentle kiss quickly deepened, her lips parting as we shared a passionate embrace. My hands roamed over her back, slipping the robe off her shoulders to reveal her smooth skin and the soft fabric of her negligee. She was breathtaking. I let the robe slide down her arms until it pooled on the floor, leaving her in just the negligee that clung to her figure. I kissed her again, losing myself in the moment, unable to resist her allure. As my kisses moved lower, I traced a path down Emily's body, lingering at her navel before continuing to her thighs. She began to writhe beneath me, her breathing quick and shallow. "I love you, Ty," she whispered between breaths. "I love you too, Emily," I replied, my words barely breaking the rhythm of the moment. I didn't want this night to end. I knew it would be the last time we shared something so passionate, and it seemed Emily felt the same. Tears slipped from her eyes as she clung to me. I held her tightly, kissing her lips, her face, and her neck as though trying to hold on to the moment. Eventually, we both sighed, the reality of dawn drawing the night to a close. I stepped out of the shower first, giving Emily time to finish while I dried off and dressed in casual clothes. She emerged moments later, and I handed her a soft, oversized towel. She had brought a change of clothes, and soon we were both ready to leave the house. "Do you want to grab brunch?" I asked. Her face lit up, and she nodded. "I'd love that." We headed to a nearby cheesecake factory in a bustling shopping center. It was just opening when we arrived at 10 a.m., and we lingered over coffee and conversation before heading back. By the time I returned home around noon, Bree's car was already in the garage. I entered through the side door, passing through the kitchen, where I noticed a pot of coffee on the stove. Pouring myself a cup, I made my way to the dining room and found Bree seated at the table, a coffee cup in front of her. Her posture was rigid, her expression stern. In contrast, I felt calm, almost smug. A faint smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. It was time to address the elephant in the room. "So," I began, "how was your evening?" "Fine," Bree replied flatly, her tone guarded. "And yours?" she asked pointedly. "Honestly," I said, leaning back with a satisfied grin, "it was incredible. Emily was affectionate and eager, and we spent the night exploring ways to make each other happy." Bree lowered her head, and I saw a single tear roll down her cheek. Guilt surged through me. This wasn't the victory it had seemed in the moment. It felt more like the biggest mistake of my life. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Didn't Stanley live up to your expectations?" "It wasn't Stanley," she snapped, then softened. "It was me. I couldn't stop thinking about you and Emily, about what you were doing together. She's so beautiful, so alluring. I knew you'd have a better time with her than I ever could with Stanley." She took a deep breath before continuing. "He tried to be gentle, to make the night romantic, but I couldn't focus." I started drinking wine at the bar before dinner. By the time we sat down, I'd already had too much. I barely touched my food, I couldn't eat, and just kept drinking. Stanley tried to stop me, suggested we dance in the living room to lighten the mood, but I was tipsy and clumsy. He grew frustrated and said we should go upstairs. She hesitated, her voice shaking. In the room, he kissed me, but it felt wrong. Then he started undressing me, and I didn't resist. I let him, but I felt nothing. No excitement, no connection. He could tell. When it was over, he looked at me with disappointment and said, "That was the worst experience of my life. What's wrong with you? You wanted this, and now you're acting like you don't care." He got dressed and left, muttering something about finding someone else at the bar. I just lay there and cried myself to sleep. Her voice grew quieter. When I woke up, it was morning. The sun was shining, and I felt empty. I showered, dressed, and left the hotel. I wanted to come home and talk to you, but you weren't here. "Emily and I went to brunch," I said plainly. "She went home afterward. I'll admit, I'm sorry your night didn't go as planned, but I'm not entirely sorry. Mine did." Bree's eyes filled with fresh tears. "I'm so sorry, Ty," she said earnestly. "I regret ever getting involved with Stanley. Now I see it for what it was. He just wanted to use me. He never cared about me. I leaned back, my tone sharp. Well, maybe you'll have better luck next time. There won't be a next time, she said quickly, her voice breaking. I'll never do this again. I want us to go back to being monogamous, to the way things were before. I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I can be the wife you deserve. Not so fast, Bree, I said firmly. You've spent months building an emotional relationship with him and weeks plotting this night together. Now that it's blown up in your face, you want me to forget everything and pretend it never happened? That's not how this works. I'm not even sure I want to stay married to you. You betrayed me, humiliated me, and tried to turn me into a fool. And now you expect me to forgive and forget like nothing happened? No, Bree. It doesn't work like that. Bree sat silently, tears streaming down her face as the weight of my words hung in the air. Bree's eyes searched mine, filled with a mixture of desperation and hope, but I continued without hesitation. Next year, I'm making some changes for myself. I'm getting a gym membership, and once a month, I'll take myself out on a date with whoever I choose. If those dates lead to something more, so be it. At the end of the year, I'll reassess our marriage. If I decide it's no longer working for me, I'll file for divorce. If I find I'm happy, I'll consider becoming exclusive with you again. You'll have this year to prove that staying together is worth it. Take it or leave it. If you can't accept these terms, I'll start divorce proceedings on Monday. Let me know your decision. Bree's voice trembled as she began to speak. Ty, I love you. I know I've taken you for granted, and I regret it deeply. The thought of you being with another woman would liquidate me, just like last night did. But losing you entirely, that would destroy me. I'll agree to your conditions. And I promise I'll spend this year showing you I can be the best wife you've ever dreamed of. By the end of it, I'll make sure you'll never want to leave me. Then it's settled, I said simply. The rest of the day passed without incident. I spent some time working in the yard and running errands. Before heading out, I offered her an olive branch. If you clean up the mess from last night and straighten up the house, I'll take you out to TGI Fridays for dinner. We can split a plate of ribs. It wasn't much, but it was my way of trying to restore some normalcy. As the probationary year began, Bree seemed to embrace her role wholeheartedly. She became an attentive and doting wife, and her efforts felt genuine. Our meals improved dramatically. Dinner often featured a small salad or soup, a hearty main course like steak with potatoes or vegetables, and even dessert. Each meal was accompanied by a glass of wine. Afterward, we worked together to clean up. Our closeness also intensified, becoming more frequent and passionate. Bree made it clear there was nothing she wouldn't do to rekindle the spark between us. One evening, over a particularly good dinner, Bree broke the silence with a casual remark. I spoke to Emily today. I tried to keep my expression neutral. Oh, what about? Bree smiled faintly. You, me, and her. What did she say? I asked, my curiosity piqued. Well, Bree began, the first thing she did was invite me to lunch. She took me to one of her favorite restaurants nearby. Over a couple of glasses of wine and some salad, I asked her point blank if she planned to take you away from me. She laughed and said, Absolutely not. Ty and I were a one-time thing. We're best friends now, but we'll never be together like that again. If anything, I think he's still upset about how hurt he was by your actions. Bree hesitated, then continued. I told her how ashamed I am of what I did to you and to our marriage. I also told her about your decision to date other women once a month and reevaluate our relationship at the end of the year. And what was her advice? I asked. She said, don't try to compete with other women. Instead, make staying home with you so irresistible that he won't want to go on those dates. Turn your home into the better option. That's exactly what I plan to do. If that's your strategy, I replied with a small grin, don't be surprised if I set up a fake date just to see what you've got planned. A few weeks later, I found myself walking into the offices of Thomas, Dixon, and Harris with a smile on my face. Emily, as usual, was stationed at her desk, guarding the entrance to the partners' offices. When she saw me, her face lit up. She stood and walked over to greet me, wrapping me in a warm hug. Ty, it's great to see you, she said warmly. We've been expecting you, or rather, Mr. Thomas has. As I held her briefly, I asked, any idea what he wants to talk to me about? Emily smirked. Of course I know everything that happens here. But it's better if you hear it from him. She returned to her desk and buzzed Mr. Thomas. After a brief exchange, she gestured for me to follow her, leading me to his office and opening the large, carved wooden door. She gave me a quick smile before closing it behind me. Ty, Mr. Thomas greeted warmly, standing and extending his hand. Good to see you again. Please, have a seat. I took the chair opposite him, and he leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. I wanted to talk to you for 2 reasons, both of which directly or indirectly involve you. He paused for a moment before continuing. First, I thought you'd like to know that we've updated our company's fraternization policy. It's much more comprehensive now. It explicitly outlines the consequences of workplace relationships, whether between employees or employees and clients. I've got a copy here for you to review at your leisure. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I thanked Mr. Thomas for addressing the issue I had brought to his attention previously. His thoughtfulness and initiative had not gone unnoticed. "Ty," he said, his tone considerate, "without prying too much, how are things at home? I genuinely hope you and Bree are finding your way forward." He paused briefly before adding, "I visited Bree's department a few days ago. We didn't talk about anything personal, strictly work-related matters. I wanted to check on her team's progress and see if there were any challenges I could help with. From what I observed, she seemed happy and at ease. Not wanting to delve into the current state of my marriage, I kept my response simple. Things are improving, and I'm optimistic that we'll be all right in the long run." Mr. Thomas smiled warmly. "I'm glad to hear that," he said. "Now let me tell you the second reason I wanted to speak with you today. It concerns a letter I sent to Hughes, Duvet, and Lewis, the firm where Stanley Wilbur is employed. Despite everything, Stanley did provide excellent assistance with a particularly complex tax issue we faced. His expertise was instrumental, and I made sure to acknowledge that. However," he added, lifting a piece of paper from his desk, "I also felt compelled to address another, less favorable aspect of his behavior. I thought you might want to hear what I wrote." Adjusting his glasses, Mr. Thomas began to read aloud. "Dear Steve, you have already received an official performance report regarding Stanley Wilbur's contributions to Thomas, Dixon, and Harris. His knowledge and expertise were invaluable in resolving a challenging tax case, and he went above and beyond by equipping our attorneys with skills to manage similar cases in the future. However, this letter is informal and private, intended to share a different perspective. While Stanley demonstrated commendable technical abilities, his personal conduct during his time here was problematic. He initiated a relationship with one of our married employees, which escalated to physical involvement. This inappropriate relationship caused significant turmoil in the employee's personal life, straining her marriage to the point where its future remains uncertain. Lawyers already contend with a less-than-stellar reputation in the public eye, often seen as valuing profit over ethics or winning over justice. In this profession, integrity is paramount. Stanley's actions raise concerns about his personal honesty, which could very well extend to his professional behavior. With this in mind, I urge you to monitor the work Stanley performs at your firm carefully. While this letter is strictly between us, I trust you'll take whatever action you believe is appropriate, or none at all. The choice is yours. Sincerely, William." Mr. Thomas folded the paper and set it aside. "This letter doesn't capture everything Stanley put you and Bree through, but it ensures that his actions won't come without repercussions. I doubt this will help him advance in his career, at least not as quickly as he might hope. This is the best I can do for you, Ty," he continued. "I hope it brings some sense of closure, knowing that Stanley won't escape unscathed." I nodded, gratitude evident in my expression. "Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Your support means a lot to me." As I left his office, I found myself lost in thought, processing the conversation. I didn't even notice Emily standing nearby until she gently interrupted. "How are you feeling about everything?" she asked softly, studying my face. I took a moment before replying. "Honestly, I feel good about how it's all played out. Things are starting to come together. I can't thank you enough for being there for me through all of this." Emily smiled warmly and pulled me into a tight hug. "Don't forget, Ty," she said softly. "I've grown from this too. I really did love you while we were together." "And I loved you too," I replied, my voice steady yet filled with emotion.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
Before we start today's story, please let us know your location in the comment section and don't forget to like and subscribe. The toast began harmlessly enough. Chloe's maid of honor shared a heartfelt story about their childhood escapades, bringing smiles all around. Timothy's best man followed with a boisterous, laugh-out-loud speech that had the entire room roaring. Everything seemed perfect, or so I thought. Then Grant stood up. I remember glancing at Nina, who suddenly became intensely focused on her wine glass, swirling it as though she could disappear into the deep red liquid. That was my first sign that something was off. Grant began his toast with a smile that felt just a little too polished, a little too deliberate. "What a beautiful day," he said, raising his glass high. "Seeing Chloe here, so radiant, so happy, it fills me with pride. Pride in the strong, determined woman she's become. And pride in knowing I've had the privilege of watching her grow into the incredible person she is today." The words themselves weren't exactly out of place, but the way he delivered them, the tone, the emphasis, sent a ripple of unease through me. I glanced around and noticed I wasn't the only one shifting uncomfortably. A few guests exchanged fleeting glances, their expressions unreadable but weighted. Grant pressed on, his tone light yet laced with something I couldn't quite identify. "It's funny, isn't it? How life works out. Some bonds are forged by blood, others by love, and sometimes it's both. Chloe, you've always been family to me in every way that matters." My heart skipped a beat. What the hell did he mean by that? Nina's hand darted out, gripping her glass so tightly her knuckles turned white. She took a long, deliberate sip, avoiding eye contact with me, or anyone else. Grant chuckled softly, the sound strained, as though trying to dispel the tension that was slowly thickening in the room. "Timothy, you're a lucky man," he said, his voice a touch too cheerful. "Chloe is one in a million, and I know she'll make you as proud as she's made all of us." The toast ended with polite applause and scattered murmurs. Grant returned to his seat, his grin unshaken, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. It was subtle, just enough to cast a shadow over the evening. I noticed Nina sneaking a glance at Grant, her expression unreadable but far from at ease. For the first time that day, I felt like a stranger at my own daughter's wedding. What did he mean by "some bonds are forged by blood"? The question gnawed at me. Why had Nina reacted the way she did? And why were some of the guests stealing glances at me like I was the only one out of the loop? As I sat there, the world seemed to tilt ever so slightly, and a seed of doubt planted itself firmly in my mind. A doubt that would grow into something far darker than I could have ever anticipated. After Grant's toast, I couldn't focus on anything else. His words played on a loop in my head, swirling like a storm. Some bonds are forged by blood, others by love. What the hell was that supposed to mean? Meanwhile, Nina acted as if nothing had happened. She laughed a little too loudly at jokes, clinked glasses with the guests, and made a point of avoiding sitting next to me for the rest of the reception. It felt deliberate, like she knew I was onto something and was keeping her distance. I tried to keep calm, but my thoughts kept circling back to moments I had brushed off before. Times when Grant seemed overly involved in Chloe's life, the way he always managed to show up for her milestones. School plays, birthdays, even small family dinners he had no real reason to attend. He'd joke about being her #1 fan, but his pride sometimes felt too intense, almost territorial. I had always dismissed it because, well, Grant was Nina's stepdad. Family was family, right? But now, with his words echoing in my ears and Nina's strange behavior, things weren't adding up. After dinner, I found Chloe in a quiet moment, sitting at a table with her new husband. She was flipping through some photos, her face glowing with happiness. I hated that my suspicions were intruding on what should have been the happiest day of her life, but I couldn't let it go. I needed answers. "Hey, I said, pulling out a chair and sitting beside her. She looked up and smiled, her cheeks flushed from the excitement of the day. "Hey, Dad," she said, her voice full of warmth. "Isn't it perfect?" "Perfect," I said, forcing a smile. "You look stunning. I'm so proud of you." Her smile brightened, and for a moment, I hesitated. What if I'm just being paranoid? What if I'm reading too much into this? But then Grant's grin and the way he'd said those words replayed in my mind, and my stomach tightened. "Listen," I began carefully, keeping my tone light. "Grant gave quite the speech, huh?" Chloe chuckled. "Yeah, he always gets a little sentimental at big events." "Has he?" I asked, hesitating before continuing. "Has he ever talked to you about, feeling like you're more than just a step-granddaughter to him?" Chloe frowned, tilting her head slightly. "What do you mean?" "Nothing." "Never mind," I said quickly, shaking my head. "I guess I'm just overthinking things." But the doubt was there now, flickering in her expression. She glanced across the room at Grant, who was animatedly chatting with distant relatives. "Grant's always been great," she said slowly, as if trying to convince herself. "He's just involved. Mom says he feels like he missed out on raising her, so he tries to make up for it with me. Her explanation should have been comforting, but it wasn't. If anything, it only stirred more questions. Later that night, after most of the guests had left, I found Nina alone in the bridal suite. She was standing in front of a large mirror, removing her jewelry. She hadn't noticed me yet, and I lingered in the doorway, watching her. She looked tired but calm, like someone who thought they'd narrowly avoided disaster. "Nina," I said, breaking the silence. She flinched, then quickly recovered, turning to face me with a practiced smile. "Evan, you scared me. We need to talk," I said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind me. She sighed, her posture stiffening. "About what? You've been acting strange all night." "Don't play dumb," I said, my voice sharp enough to make her eyes narrow. "Grant's toast. What did he mean by that?" Her expression hardened. "Evan, he was just being sentimental. You're overthinking it." "I don't think I am," I shot back. "In fact, I think you've been hiding something from me for a long time. Something about Chloe." The color drained from her face, and for the first time that night, she looked genuinely shaken. "Don't," she said quietly, almost pleading. "Don't what?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Don't ask questions? Don't dig into why Grant acts like Chloe is more than just his step-granddaughter? Or don't uncover whatever the hell it is you're so desperate to keep buried." "Stop it, Evan," she snapped, her tone sharp and cutting. "You're ruining a beautiful day with your stupid insecurities." "Insecurities?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Nina, I've worked 2 jobs for 5 years to give our daughter the wedding of her dreams. And now, on the day I should be celebrating, I'm standing here wondering if she's even mine. Do you have any idea how that feels?" She froze, her mouth opening and closing as though she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. I stepped closer, lowering my voice but not the intensity. "Tell me the truth, Nina. Is Grant Chloe's father?" Her reaction wasn't what I expected. She didn't deny it outright, but she didn't confirm it either. Instead, she just stared at me, her jaw tight, her eyes blazing with defiance. "This isn't the time or place," she said finally, her voice trembling but resolute. "You don't want to do this, Evan." Her refusal to answer was all the confirmation I needed. My entire world shifted, the ground beneath me feeling less solid with every passing second. "I'll find out," I said coldly. "If you won't tell me, I'll find out myself." Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Fear and something else. Something that looked an awful lot like hatred. That night, I didn't sleep. After the wedding, I drove home alone, leaving Nina to stay at the hotel with Chloe and the other guests who had booked rooms. We didn't argue about it, and there wasn't any pretense of an excuse. She didn't even ask if I'd be staying. I think we both knew that if we shared the same space that night, something would explode, and neither of us wanted to face the fallout just yet. The house felt unnaturally quiet when I walked in. My footsteps echoed down the hallway, and for the first time, it felt like I didn't belong there. The walls were lined with pictures of Chloe as a little girl. Her first day of school, her first soccer game, her high school graduation. They were moments I had always thought were mine. Now, every smiling photo felt like a cruel lie, a bitter joke the universe was playing on me. I sat at the kitchen table, a bottle of whiskey and my laptop in front of me. Sitting in silence, drowning in my own thoughts, wasn't an option. I needed answers, something concrete to hold on to. Opening the laptop, I typed the question I never imagined I'd have to ask. How to do a DNA paternity test without the other parent knowing. It wasn't hard to find what I needed. Dozens of companies offer discrete testing kits, just a simple cheek swab or a hair sample, and they'd handle the rest. The real challenge would be getting a sample without raising suspicion. Chloe didn't live with us anymore, but she often left things behind when she visited. If I searched, I might find something, a hairbrush, an old toothbrush, anything. I clenched my fists, disgusted with myself. Was this really what it had come to? Secretly testing my daughter's DNA because I didn't trust my wife? But then Grant's words came back to me. Nina's reaction. The fear in her eyes during our argument. Yes, this was what it had come to. The next morning, I went into the room Chloe had used when she stayed with us. It was like stepping into a shrine. Her posters still hung on the walls, her childhood trophies lined the shelves, and even some old clothes remained in the closet. My heart twisted as I searched through her belongings, feeling like a thief in my own home. Eventually, I found a hairbrush tucked away in a drawer. The golden strands tangled in its bristles made my chest tighten. I sealed the brush in a plastic bag and immediately ordered a DNA test kit online, opting for express delivery. By the time Nina came home that evening, I had hidden the bag in my office drawer. She walked in quietly, saying little. No apologies. No explanations. She greeted me with a curt, emotionless hey, as though nothing had happened. Hey, I replied, watching her closely. She poured herself a glass of wine and settled onto the couch, scrolling through her phone like it was any other evening. I waited, hoping she'd say something, offer an explanation, a defense, anything. But she stayed silent, playing it cool, pretending everything was fine. About last night, I began, keeping my voice steady but low. She didn't even glance up from her phone. I don't want to talk about it. Well, I do. She let out a dramatic sigh, finally setting her phone down. What do you want me to say, Evan? That you're crazy? That you're blowing this out of proportion? Grant's toast meant nothing. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Her dismissive tone struck a nerve, igniting something raw inside me. Nothing? I repeated bitterly. You're calling his comment about bonds of blood nothing? Do you really think I'm that stupid, Nina? Her eyes met mine at last, cold and defiant. I think you're letting your jealousy of Grant cloud your judgment. I let out a bitter laugh. Jealousy? That's your excuse? You've been hiding something for years, haven't you? Nina shot to her feet, slamming her glass onto the coffee table. I'm not doing this, Evan. Not tonight. You never want to do this, Nina. I fired back, my voice rising. Because you're terrified of what I'll find if I dig too deep. But I'm done letting you dodge the truth. One way or another, I'm going to find out. For a fleeting moment, her expression cracked. Fear, guilt, something she tried to mask with anger. You're being ridiculous, she snapped before storming out of the room. Her reaction only strengthened my resolve. 2 days later, the DNA kit arrived. My hands trembled as I opened the package, carefully following the instructions. I extracted the strands of hair from the brush, sealed them in the provided bag, and mailed it off the same day, paying extra for expedited results. The waiting was unbearable. Every moment spent under the same roof with Nina felt like a silent battlefield. On the surface, she acted like everything was normal, cooking dinner, watching TV, but the unspoken tension between us was suffocating. I saw it in the way she avoided meeting my eyes, the way her smile no longer reached her face. Then, one evening, the email arrived. The results were ready. I locked myself in my office, my heart pounding in my chest as I clicked the link. The document loaded agonizingly slowly, each second stretching into an eternity. And then, the page appeared. Probability of paternity, 0%. I stared at the words, my vision blurring. My stomach dropped, and my chest tightened as though the air had been sucked out of the room. There it was, cold and clinical, the confirmation of my worst fear. Chloe wasn't mine. My hands curled into fists, and for a moment, I thought I might smash something, anything, to release the fury surging through me. The rage, the betrayal, the utter devastation. It all hit me at once, like a tidal wave threatening to drown me. But slowly, the storm inside me began to subside. Not because the anger had faded, it hadn't, but because something colder and sharper took its place. Resolve. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Nina and Grant had lied to me, stolen years of my life, and made me their unwitting pawn. But they had underestimated one thing. I wasn't the kind of man to let betrayal slide. This was only the beginning. The truth burned in my chest like acid. Every time I glanced at Chloe's photos on the wall, her smiling face frozen in time, my heart shattered a little more. I loved her, and nothing could ever change that. But the betrayal behind her existence was unbearable. Nina had taken something sacred from me. Every memory, every moment I'd cherished as a father, had been tainted by her lies. And yet, it wasn't just the rage or the grief that consumed me. It was the questions. How long had Nina and Grant been deceiving me? Had she ever truly loved me? Or was I just a convenient fool to raise another man's child? How many people in our lives had known the truth while I lived in blissful ignorance? The days after the results were a blur of cold, simmering silence and calculated planning. I avoided Nina as much as I could, my mind consumed by a single goal, justice. She had stolen 5 years of my life, my trust, and my dignity, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. But first, I needed proof. Proof of who Chloe's real father was. The next weekend, I made my move. Without warning, I drove to Grant's house. It was a modest place about 30 minutes away. I didn't call ahead, didn't give him time to prepare. When he opened the door, the smug smile that greeted me made my blood boil. Clearly, he thought this was just another friendly visit. Evan, Didn't expect to see you today, Grant said, leaning casually against the doorframe. We need to talk, I replied, keeping my voice steady. He hesitated, his confidence flickering for just a moment before stepping aside. Sure. Come on in. The house was painfully neat, almost like he'd staged it to project control and order. It only made my stomach churn. We sat in the living room, and I wasted no time. Chloe isn't my daughter, I said flatly, locking my eyes on his. For a split second, his face betrayed him. A flicker of guilt, fear, or both. But he quickly covered it with an expression of feigned confusion. What are you talking about, Evan? I did a DNA test, I said, leaning forward, my voice cold and steady. She's not mine. So I'll ask you once, are you her father? Grant let out a nervous laugh, shaking his head. Evan, you've been under a lot of stress lately. I think you're letting your imagination run wild. Don't lie to me, Grant, I growled, my voice rising as I stood. You stood at her wedding and practically bragged about it. Bonds of blood? Give me a break. How long have you and Nina been screwing me over? That struck a nerve. His smug smile faltered, and for a brief moment, I thought he might actually confess. But then he leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms with an infuriating shrug. You don't have any proof of that, he said, his tone dripping with smugness. I clenched my fists, barely holding back the urge to wipe that grin off his face. Maybe not yet, I said, my voice low and venomous as I stood. But I will. And when I do, you and Nina are going to wish you'd never crossed me. Grant's expression darkened, but he said nothing. I left his house seething, my blood boiling with rage. But deep down, there was a grim satisfaction. He hadn't denied it outright. That hesitation, that flicker of guilt, it was enough to keep me going. The next few days were spent in a relentless search. I dug through every detail of Grant's and Nina's lives. Old photos, receipts, even social media posts. I wasn't going to stop until I had proof. And then I found it. A photo from over 20 years ago, taken at a family barbecue. Nina stood next to Grant, her body angled toward him in a way that felt far too intimate for a stepfather and stepdaughter. But it wasn't the pose that stopped me. It was the date. The photo had been taken 9 months before Chloe was born. My chest tightened as I stared at the screen. It was circumstantial evidence, sure, but combined with everything else, it painted a damning picture. I saved the image, filing it away with the rest of my evidence. I wasn't done yet. If I was going to confront Nina, I needed to leave her with no way out. That evening, I waited for her to come home. She walked in around 7 p.m., looking tired but composed. Hey, she said cautiously, sensing the tension in the air. Sit down, I said, my voice cold. Her eyes flicked to mine, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of nervousness. What's this about? I placed the DNA results and the photo on the table between us. Explain this, I said simply. Nina's face drained of color. She stared at the papers for a long moment before finally meeting my gaze. Evan, don't lie. I cut her off sharply. I've already done the math. Nina, what I want now is the truth. How long has this been going on? Her lips trembled, and for a brief moment, I thought she might actually come clean. But then, true to form, she went on the defensive. You're blowing this out of proportion, she said, her voice shaky with forced indignation. Grant and there's nothing. Don't. I slammed my fist on the table, cutting her off again. Don't insult me. And Nina thought they could bury the truth under a pile of lies and manipulation. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The next step in my plan was risky, but necessary. I needed to get close to Chloe again without letting my suspicions show. She was the key to uncovering the full truth. Not just because she deserved it, but because she might unknowingly hold pieces of their cover-up. A week after confronting Nina, I called Chloe under the guise of wanting to spend time together. We hadn't spoken much since her wedding, and I could sense something weighing on her when she picked up. Hey, Dad, she said, her voice hesitant. What's up? Just thought we could grab lunch or something, I said casually. It's been a while. There was a pause on the other end. For a moment, I thought she might decline. Then she sighed. Yeah, sure. That sounds nice. We met at a small cafe downtown, one of her favorite spots. She looked tired, like the stress of post-wedding life was already catching up to her. Or maybe she had picked up on the tension between Nina and me. How's married life treating you? I asked once we were seated. She smiled faintly, stirring her coffee. Good. Busy. Timothy and I are still settling into the new apartment. I nodded, keeping the conversation light and easy at first. But as the moment felt right, I carefully steered it toward the real reason I'd asked to see her. Your mom and I have been having some issues, I said, keeping my tone measured. Chloe frowned, concern flickering in her eyes. What kind of issues? I hesitated, as though deciding how much to share. It's complicated, I said slowly. I just feel like there are things she hasn't been honest about. Things involving your grandfather.
Grant.
Her frown deepened. What do you mean? You know how close they've always been, I said, leaning in slightly. Has she ever said anything to you about their relationship? Anything that seemed unusual? Chloe's eyes widened slightly, and for just a moment, I saw a flicker of recognition. She glanced down at her coffee, avoiding my gaze. Dad, what's going on? Why are you asking me this? I took a deep breath, steadying myself, because I need to know if there's something she's keeping from me.
From us.
Chloe sat silently for a long moment, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her cup. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible. I don't know anything for sure, but... She trailed off, biting her lip. But what? I pressed gently. She looked up at me, her expression hesitant. There were times growing up when I felt like Grandpa Grant treated me differently, she admitted. Not in a bad way, just different. He was always so involved, almost more than you or Mom. It felt like he cared about everything I did. Sometimes too much. Her words cut through me like a knife. I fought to keep my face neutral, but inside, I was seething. Did he ever say anything? Do anything that made you uncomfortable? I asked. No, she replied quickly. Nothing like that. But there was this one time. She hesitated, her brow furrowing as if she were still trying to process the memory. What time? I asked, my voice calm but insistent. When I was about 16, I overheard him and Mom arguing in the kitchen, Chloe said. I couldn't hear everything, but he kept saying something about protecting the truth. Mom told him to lower his voice, that I might hear them. When I asked her about it later, she just said it was about family stuff. Nothing for me to worry about. My jaw clenched, and a fresh wave of anger washed over me. Nina had been lying to protect Grant for years, keeping both Chloe and me in the dark. Chloe, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. I need you to trust me on this. There's something I'm trying to figure out, and I think it's important for both of us. If you remember anything else, anything that seems strange, will you tell me? She nodded, her face full of concern. Of course, Dad. But are you okay? You seem different lately. I'm fine, I lied, forcing a smile. Just trying to sort some things out. We finished lunch, and as I walked her to her car, I felt a mix of guilt and determination. I hated dragging her into this mess, but if there was one thing I was certain of, it was that Chloe deserved the truth just as much as I did. That night, I sat in my office, staring at the picture of Grant and Nina at the barbecue. The pieces were starting to come together, but I needed something more. A final, undeniable piece of evidence. And then it hit me. Grant wasn't just smug. He was arrogant. People like him always left something behind. Some clue they thought they'd hidden well enough. I knew I had to find it. With that thought, I began strategizing my next move. It was time to dig deeper, go beyond the surface and uncover everything they'd been hiding. Nina and Grant had already taken so much from me, and now it was my turn to reclaim something. I wasn't about to let them win. They'd built their web of lies on my back, stolen years of my life, and turned me into a pawn in their twisted game. But I wasn't the same man I had been at the wedding. No more blind trust. No more excuses. It was time to bring their whole facade crashing down. The first step was to infiltrate Grant's world. If he'd been arrogant enough to let something slip at the wedding, there had to be more. Texts, emails, something that tied him and Nina together in ways they couldn't deny. I just needed access. A week later, I saw my chance. Grant was hosting a small family gathering at his house, a belated wedding celebration for Chloe and Timothy. Nina insisted I attend, probably to maintain appearances. She was doing everything she could to act like nothing was wrong, as if the cracks in our marriage weren't threatening to consume us. I played along. The gathering was exactly what I expected. Polite small talk, drinks flowing a little too freely, and Grant playing the role of the charming patriarch. But my focus wasn't on the party. It was on Grant's office. After an hour of feigning interest in boring conversations, I excused myself, pretending I needed to make a work call. Grant's office was down the hall, tucked behind a closed door. This was my moment. The door wasn't locked, so I slipped inside, closing it quietly behind me. The room was spotless, bookshelves filled with dusty hardcovers, a pristine desk, and a laptop sitting in the center. My heart raced as I sat down and powered it on. Of course, The laptop required a password, but Grant's arrogance played in my favor. A sticky note tucked under the keyboard had the password written in plain sight. Grant 2021. I typed it in, and the desktop appeared immediately. I went straight for his email, not expecting to find much. People like Grant didn't leave obvious evidence lying around. But then, in the sent folder, I stumbled upon a chain of emails that made my stomach twist. The subject line was simply E, and though the messages weren't explicit, they didn't need to be. They were filled with phrases like, "We can't let him find out, it's better this way," and "Our secret is safe." The dates aligned perfectly with key events in Chloe's life. Her first day of school, her graduation, and even the wedding. One email in particular stood out. It was sent just weeks before the wedding, addressed to Nina. The message began, "I've been thinking about the toast. Are you sure this is a good idea? Evan isn't stupid. If he connects the dots, this could all blow up in our faces." Nina's reply was brief, yet chilling. "Stick to the plan. He won't suspect a thing." My hands trembled as I read their words. The toast wasn't some slip-up. It had been a deliberate move, a calculated blend of arrogance and carelessness that they thought I would let slide. Before I could dig deeper, I heard footsteps in the hallway. My heart raced as the doorknob began to turn. The door creaked open, and there stood Grant. His eyes quickly assessed the situation, narrowing as they fixed on me sitting at his desk, his laptop wide open in front of me. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the tension so thick I felt like the walls might collapse under the weight of it. "What the hell are you doing, Evan?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. "Finding the truth," I replied, standing up slowly. Grant stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. His expression shifted, no longer the friendly, charming persona he usually wore. This was the real Grant, cold, calculating, and dangerous. "You shouldn't have done that," he said, his voice low, menacing. "I shouldn't have trusted you." I shot back, my tone steady, "But that's over now. I know everything." Grant's laughter was quiet but bitter, like the sound of something breaking. "You don't know anything. All you have are suspicions and half-truths. You can't prove a damn thing." I smirked and held up my phone. "I don't need to. I've got enough right here to ruin you." For the first time, I saw Grant's composure crack. His jaw tightened, and his eyes flicked toward the laptop. "You think you're clever, don't you?" "No," I said, stepping closer. "I'm just done being your fool." Grant lunged for the laptop, but I was quicker. I slammed the lid shut and grabbed the device off the desk, tucking it under my arm. "This ends tonight," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Nina, Chloe, they're going to know exactly who you are." Grant's face twisted in rage, but he didn't stop me as I walked past him and out of the office. The party was still in full swing, oblivious to the storm unfolding just down the hall. As I left the house, my resolve hardened. Nina and Grant had thought they could bury the truth, but they had underestimated me. Now, I had everything I needed to tear them apart. I didn't sleep that night, but this time it wasn't from doubt or confusion. It was the adrenaline, the raw fury surging through me as I replayed everything I had uncovered. The emails, the timing, the lies. They all painted a picture so vivid it felt like a slap to the face. Grant and Nina had been in this together from the very beginning. Every moment of my life that they had touched now felt tainted. Every laugh, every hug, every shared memory with Chloe. They were all stained by their betrayal. But if they thought I was going to crumble, they were sorely mistaken. The next morning, I made my move. I didn't reach out to Nina or Chloe. I needed to approach this strategically to ensure the truth came out in a way that left no room for denial or manipulation. I started by contacting Chloe's husband, Timothy. "Hey, Timothy," I said when he picked up. "I need your help with something." Timothy sounded surprised but not unwilling. "Sure, Evan. What's going on?" "It's about Chloe," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "There's something I need to talk to her about, something big, but I want you there when I do." Timothy hesitated, but concern edged his voice. "Okay, when?" "Tonight. Can you both come over to the house?" "Of course," he said. "We'll be there." That evening, I was ready. I had the DNA results printed, the emails from Grant saved on a flash drive, and the photo from the barbecue framed and sitting on the table, a damning centerpiece. When Chloe and Timothy arrived, Nina was already home, sitting stiffly on the couch. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. "What's this about, Dad?" Chloe asked, her voice a mixture of confusion and concern. "Sit down," I said, motioning to the chairs across from me. Chloe and Timothy exchanged a glance before sitting. Nina remained silent, her face pale, her hands gripping the edge of the couch. "This is about the truth," I began. My eyes locked on Nina. "Something your mother has been hiding from all of us for years." "Evan, don't do this," Nina whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm done protecting you," I snapped, never breaking eye contact. "You've had your chance to come clean. Now it's my turn." I turned to Chloe, my heart heavy with what I had to say. "Chloe, I need you to know something. I love you. That will never change, no matter what. But there's something I found out recently that you deserve to know." Her brow furrowed, confusion giving way to concern. "What are you talking about?" I handed her the DNA results, my hands steady despite the storm raging inside me. "I'm not your biological father." The room fell into silence. Chloe's eyes scanned the paper, her hands trembling as she read the words. This can't be right," she whispered. "It is," I said quietly. "I've known for weeks, and that's not all." I picked up the framed photo and handed it to her. "This was taken 9 months before you were born. Your mother and Grant were already closer than they should have been." Nina let out a sharp breath, her voice shaking. "Evan, stop it. You don't have to do this." I ignored her, pulling out the flash drive and plugging it into the laptop I had set up on the coffee table. I opened the folder and said, "And here are the emails, showing the correspondence between Nina and Grant. They were planning how to keep this secret, even after all these years." Timothy leaned forward, his face a mask of disbelief. Chloe sat frozen, tears streaming down her face as the truth sank in. Nina finally cracked. "I did it for us," she cried, her voice frantic. "For our family. I didn't want to hurt anyone. For us." I repeated, my voice sharp and bitter. "You did it for yourself. You lied to me, to Chloe, to everyone. You used me to cover your shame." "Mom," Chloe choked out, her voice trembling. "Is this true? Is Grant? Is he my father?" Nina's face crumpled as she buried her head in her hands, sobbing. She didn't need to answer. Her silence spoke volumes. Chloe stood up suddenly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I can't believe this," she said, her voice breaking. "You lied to me my entire life. Both of you." She turned to Timothy, tears streaming down her face. "We have to go." "Chloe, wait." Nina called after her, but it was too late. Chloe stormed out, Timothy close behind her. I watched them leave, my heart breaking into a million pieces. But as the door slammed behind them, I turned back to Nina. "You've destroyed everything," I said coldly. Nina looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "I never meant for it to go this far," she whispered. "You don't get to play the victim," I snapped, standing over her. "This is just the beginning, Nina. You and Grant think you can get away with this? Watch me." For the first time, real fear flashed in her eyes. Without saying another word, I walked out of the room, leaving her alone with the mess she had created. But I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about making them feel every ounce of pain they had caused me. And I wouldn't stop until they did. After Chloe stormed out, the house was eerily silent, broken only by Nina's quiet sobs. I felt no sympathy for her. Not anymore. She had shattered everything we had built together. And for what? To protect her secret with Grant? To cling to the illusion of a happy family? The fallout wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, I received a call from Timothy. Timothy's voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of anger and confusion. "Evan," he began, "Chloe's devastated. She doesn't know what to believe right now. I told her to take a day, breathe, and then figure out what to do next. But I need to ask you, is it true about Grant?" "It's true," I replied firmly. "Every word of it. I wouldn't have told her if I wasn't absolutely sure." Timothy sighed heavily on the other end. "She's asking a lot of questions about her mom, about her real father. I think she wants to confront Grant." That hit me like a punch to the gut. Chloe shouldn't have to face Grant directly. But maybe this was it. The final piece of the puzzle, the moment Grant's lies would finally come crashing down. "Let her," I said after a pause. "She deserves to hear the truth from him, and I'll be there when she does." Timothy hesitated, but eventually agreed. "Okay, I'll talk to her and let you know." The meeting was set for that evening. Chloe wanted answers, and she wanted them face-to-face with Grant and Nina. She insisted I come, though I could tell she wasn't sure what role I would play in this unfolding drama. Grant, as expected, tried to avoid the meeting. When Chloe called him, he claimed to be too busy, but her anger broke through his excuses. "You owe me the truth," she said, her voice trembling. "You've owed me that my whole life." Grant finally gave in. We met at his house, a neutral setting, but it felt anything but. Nina and Chloe sat on one side of the living room, Timothy and I on the other. Grant stood near the fireplace, a glass of whiskey in hand. His usual arrogance was still there, but I could see the cracks in his facade. Chloe didn't waste any time. "Are you my father?" she asked, her voice shaking but resolute. Grant looked at Nina, then back at Chloe. For a moment, he seemed to struggle with himself. But then, with a sigh, he sat down and placed his glass on the table. "Yes," he said simply. The room seemed to freeze. Nina let out a quiet sob, but Chloe wasn't looking at her. Her eyes were fixed on Grant, wide with a mix of horror and disbelief. "How could you?" she whispered. "You lied to me. My whole life. You lied to me." "I didn't want to hurt you," Grant replied, his tone almost condescending. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "Then how was it supposed to happen?" she snapped, her voice rising. "Were you ever going to tell me? Or was I just supposed to keep living a lie?" Nina tried to intervene, but Chloe silenced her with a sharp glare. Don't say a word. You're just as guilty as he is." The tension in the room was suffocating. My heart ached for Chloe, but I knew this was her moment. She needed to face them on her own terms. "You used Dad," she said, her voice cracking. "You used him to raise me, to pay for everything, to be the father you couldn't be. And you," she turned toward Nina, "you let him. You let him steal everything from Dad." Nina's sobs grew louder, but Chloe wasn't finished. "I don't even know who I am anymore," she continued, tears streaming down her face. "Everything I thought I knew about my family, it's all gone. You took that from me." Grant attempted to defend himself, but I stood up and cut him off. "Save it," I said coldly. "You've done enough damage." Grant glared at me, his composure beginning to crumble. "And what are you going to do, Evan?" he sneered. "Ruin the family? Destroy everything over this?" I stepped closer, towering over him. "You already destroyed everything. But don't worry, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you are." Grant paled, his bravado faltering. "You wouldn't dare," he muttered. "Oh, I would," I said, my voice low and dangerous. Suddenly, Chloe stood up, the sound of her chair scraping across the floor echoing through the room. "I'm done," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't want anything to do with either of you." She turned to me, her eyes full of pain. "Can we go?" "Of course," I replied softly. As we walked out, leaving Nina and Grant behind in their guilt and silence, a strange mix of emotions filled me. I felt sadness for Chloe, relief that the truth was finally out, and a growing sense of determination. This wasn't over. Nina and Grant had taken years of my life, stolen my family, and shattered my trust. But now, I had the truth, and I was going to make sure they never hurt anyone again. My revenge was just beginning. Leaving Grant's house didn't feel like closure. It felt like the first strike in a war that had been building for decades. The truth had come out, but that wasn't enough. Not yet. Chloe was devastated. Timothy was furious. And Nina? Nina was coming apart at the seams. I could see it in her wild eyes and trembling hands as she called out, begging Chloe to talk to her, to give her a chance to explain. But some betrayals are too deep for words. On the drive home, Chloe was silent, staring out the window with tears glistening on her cheeks. I didn't push her. What could I say that wouldn't sound empty? That I was sorry? That I should have known? Nothing could undo the pain she was feeling. When we pulled into their driveway, Timothy turned to me, his face somber. "Thank you for being there tonight," he said. I nodded. "Take care of her." Chloe didn't speak as she got out of the car, but before closing the door, she hesitated and looked back at me. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered. Her words hit me harder than any betrayal. "You don't need to apologize for anything," I said, my voice breaking. "This isn't your fault," I said softly. Chloe nodded faintly before turning and walking into the house. I sat in the car for a long while, my eyes fixed on the dark street ahead. The weight of everything pressed down on me like a heavy blanket, but beneath it, a seething anger was rising. Grant and Nina had shattered my family, my trust, and Chloe's sense of who she was. They had used me as a pawn in their twisted game, and now they would pay. The next morning, I began putting my plan into action. I wasn't looking for just any revenge. I wanted something deliberate, something that would hit them where it hurt the most. Step 1. Nina. She was the mastermind behind the lies, the one who had carefully integrated Grant into our lives while keeping me in the dark. She had manipulated me, betrayed me, and let me pour my heart and soul into a family built on falsehoods. There was no way she was going to walk away unscathed. I started by collecting every piece of financial information I could find. Joint accounts, credit cards, savings. I knew Nina had been siphoning money for years, using family emergencies that always seemed to coincide with Grant's needs. I documented everything, creating a timeline of her spending that painted a damning picture. Next, I contacted a divorce lawyer, one recommended by a friend who'd been through a particularly brutal split. I laid everything out for him. The DNA results, the emails, the financial discrepancies. He listened carefully, his eyes narrowing as he took notes. "This is going to get ugly," he said when I finished. "Good," I replied, my voice steely. The lawyer smirked slightly. "Then let's get to work." Step 2, Grant. He thought his arrogance would protect him, but he underestimated just how much leverage I had now. The emails alone were enough to destroy him, but I wasn't stopping there. Grant was a respected community leader, chairman of several boards, a generous donor, and a regular at every networking event. But behind the polished image was a man who had spent years manipulating those closest to him. I started small, anonymously forwarding a few of the less damaging emails to influential figures in the community, just enough to cast doubt on his integrity. Then, I dug deeper, compiling a comprehensive dossier of his financial dealings. I uncovered questionable donations and shady agreements that wouldn't sit well with the organizations he was involved with. I didn't release it all at once, too easy. Instead, I leaked it bit by bit, letting the scandal grow, feeding it to the right people until Grant's reputation was in shambles. The final blow came when I confronted Grant at a public charity gala. He didn't see it coming, too absorbed in charming the local elite. "Having a good time?" I asked, stepping into his line of sight. Grant froze, his face draining of color as he recognized me. "Evan," he said, his voice tight. "What are you doing here?" I smiled, holding up a small envelope. "Just thought you'd want a copy of this. It's a full breakdown of your donations. I'm sure the IRS will find it fascinating." Panic flashed in his eyes, and his composure cracked. "You wouldn't." "Oh, I already did." I cut him off, my tone cold. "You think you can destroy my family and just walk away? Think again." He didn't respond, just stood there, a mask of fury and humiliation, while I walked away, leaving him to face the inevitable fallout. In the weeks that followed, everything fell apart for Nina and Grant. The divorce papers hit Nina like a ton of bricks, and the financial records left her with no ground to stand on. She tried to plead, to negotiate, but I refused to relent. Meanwhile, Grant became a pariah. His reputation was shredded, his finances examined, and his connections severed. The once proud patriarch was now just a disgraced figure, left to pick up the pieces of a life he had destroyed. Chloe pulled away from both of them, leaning on Timothy and me for support. She was still processing everything, but I could see her regaining her strength, little by little. As for me, I wasn't the same man I had been at that wedding. I'd lost so much, but in the process, I had gained something far more valuable: clarity. Nina and Grant had thought they could strip everything from me and walk away unscathed. They were wrong. Their lives were in ruins, but I didn't feel a sense of triumph. Revenge wasn't the glorious, satisfying crescendo that movies depict. It was cold, hollow, and, ultimately, necessary. The divorce was finalized within a few months. Nina walked away with little more than the clothes on her back and a small fraction of our savings, just enough to keep the courts off my back. I kept the house, the cars, and, most importantly, my dignity. Grant, meanwhile, slinked out of the community, his reputation beyond repair. Chloe and I began to rebuild, step by step. She completely cut off Nina and refused to acknowledge Grant. Timothy remained a steady support for her, and I was grateful she had someone like him to lean on. But the scars were deep, and healing wasn't going to be easy or quick. A few months after the storm had calmed, Chloe and I sat together on the back porch of my house, watching the sunset filter through the trees. It was the first time in weeks that she seemed truly at peace. "I still don't know who I am," she said softly, breaking the quiet. I turned to her, the weight of her words pressing on me. "You're Chloe," I replied. "You're kind, smart, strong, and brave. You're everything I hoped you'd be, and none of that has changed." She looked at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "But I feel lost. Like my whole life was a lie." "It wasn't a lie," I said gently. "Not all of it. The love we shared, the memories we made, those were real. Just because you found out the truth about where you came from doesn't mean everything else was fake." She nodded slowly, taking in my words. "And you? How do you feel about all of this?" I leaned back in my chair, gazing at the horizon. Angry sometimes, hurt, but mostly grateful. Grateful? She asked, her brow furrowing. For you, I said simply. For the chance to raise you, to love you, to watch you grow into the incredible woman you are. Biology doesn't change that. It never will. Her tears spilled over, and she reached for my hand, holding it tightly. You'll always be my dad, she whispered. And you'll always be my daughter, I replied, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. In the months that followed, I found myself reflecting on the lessons this ordeal had taught me. Betrayal is a wound that cuts deep, but it also exposes truth you might never have seen otherwise. It showed me who I could trust and who I couldn't. To any man who might find himself in my position, my advice is this: trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, don't ignore it. Silence and doubt only grow. Fight for the truth, even if it hurts, even if it changes everything. The truth is always worth knowing. Love isn't always about blood. Family is built on the bonds you create, not just the ones you're born into. I lost a lot, but I gained clarity and a deeper understanding of what truly matters. It's the people who choose to stand by you, not out of obligation, but because they love you for who you are. Revenge might have fueled me, but love was the foundation that helped me rebuild. In the end, that was what mattered most. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
I never thought I'd be writing something like this on Reddit, but here I am, spilling out 10 years of marriage like it's some kind of therapy session. You think you know someone, right? You trust them, build a life together, and then they turn around and throw something at you that makes you question everything. I guess I just never expected my wife to cheat on me, at least not in the way she did. It's funny, right? When you hear cheating, you picture something secret, something shady. Late-night texts, sneaking around, and whispered conversations behind closed doors. But no, Lisa, my wife of a decade, came right out with it, bold as brass, offering up the idea of an open relationship like she was doing me a favor. Seriously, is that normal? Am I the crazy one for thinking that's just wrong? I thought we were supposed to be partners, not whatever the hell that is. I'm not a writer or anything, so don't expect this to be some polished story. I'm just a regular guy, scrolling through Reddit like everyone else, and now I'm dumping my marriage problems on the internet because what else can I do? If I'm going through this, maybe someone else has, too. Maybe it'll help me make sense of it all if I lay it out here. So, let me introduce myself properly. My name's Mark. I'm 38, just your average guy. I've been married to Lisa, she's 35, for about 10 years now. We got together when we were younger, full of energy, and everything felt right back then. We had that spark, you know? The kind of chemistry that makes you feel like you've hit the jackpot. She was smart, funny, beautiful, everything I could ever want in a partner. And for a while, it was great. We were great. But 10 years is a long time. Life happens, people change, and things between us, well, they cooled off. I'm not gonna lie, we were tired of each other. It wasn't like we hated each other or anything, far from it. But when you live with someone for that long, share a bed, a bathroom, bills, groceries, and God knows what else, you lose that magic somewhere along the way. It becomes routine. And, yeah, the sex suffered. At first, I didn't think much of it. We were busy with work, life, and everything else. But months went by, and the bedroom was dead silent. And when we did try, it felt forced, like we were checking off some kind of marital duty. I'm not proud of it, but there were nights when I'd lie there, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was just how things were going to be from now on. I figured maybe we just needed help, you know, so I suggested Lisa see a psychologist. Maybe there was something going on that she wasn't telling me. Surprisingly, she agreed without much pushback. I thought, okay, maybe we're finally gonna work through this, but nope. Those therapy sessions did jack. If anything, things got weirder between us. I don't know if she was really talking in those sessions or just going through the motions, but whatever was going on in her head, it wasn't fixing our problems. In fact, everything took a nosedive right after she started hanging out with Amanda again. Now, Amanda, don't even get me started. I never liked her. She's one of those types who thinks she's got life all figured out because she's free-spirited or whatever. Every time she's around, I get that vibe like she's quietly judging our relationship, thinking she knows better. She's divorced, by the way, which isn't a surprise, considering the way she talks about marriage. To her, it's some outdated institution that people only do because they're too afraid to be alone. So, when Lisa started hanging out with her more and more, I knew something was up. I just didn't think it would lead to this. One night, after Lisa had spent the whole damn day with Amanda, she came home, and I could tell something was off. She had this weird look, like she was nervous but trying to cover it up with some fake confidence. That's when she sat me down on the couch, all serious-like, and hit me with it. "Mark," she said, "I've been thinking about our marriage." And you know, when someone starts a sentence like that, it's never going to end well. I could feel the knot in my stomach tighten up, but I tried to stay calm, hear her out. Then she said it. She actually suggested we open our marriage. My first thought was, is this some kind of sick joke? But no, she was dead serious. She said it like it was the most logical thing in the world, like she was offering up a new way to save us. According to her, it wasn't cheating because I'd know about it, because I'd know who she was with and where she was going. Like somehow that would make it all okay. She used words like freedom and trust as if that's what this was about. I sat there, just staring at her, trying to process what the hell she was saying. My wife, the woman I'd spent a decade with, was basically asking for permission to screw other people. How was that not cheating? How was that supposed to be some kind of solution to our problems? I couldn't wrap my head around it. It felt like a betrayal, like she'd already made up her mind and was just waiting for me to give her the green light. I tried to ask her why. Why now? Why this? She went on about how Amanda had helped her see things differently, how we were stuck in a rut, and this was a way out. "It's not betrayal if you know about it," she said, like that somehow made it less painful. Like being told your wife wants to sleep with other men is supposed to hurt less if she's upfront about it. The whole conversation just collapsed. I was too pissed, too shocked to even think straight, and she was too convinced she was right. We didn't resolve anything. We didn't yell or scream, but the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Eventually, we both just got up and went to separate rooms, like strangers in our own home. She's probably in the other room right now, texting Amanda, getting more ideas about how to turn our marriage into some kind of open-door policy. So, after that night, after she dropped the whole open relationship bomb on me, things didn't just go back to normal. Of course, they didn't. I mean, how could they? Lisa seemed to think everything was settled, like I'd agreed to her ridiculous idea just by not storming out that night. The next few weeks were a blur of tension and awkward silences. She started going out more. And not just with Amanda. No, she was going on dates. Actual, real dates. With other guys. I don't know what the hell I was thinking letting it happen, but I guess I just froze. Part of me wanted to walk away, pack up, and be done with it. Another part of me, I don't know, was still in shock, trying to wrap my head around how we'd ended up here. She'd leave the house, dressed up more than I'd seen her in months, perfume thick in the air, and just go. Like this was the new normal. And every time she left, I felt a little more disgusted. I wanted to scream at her, at myself, but I couldn't even muster the energy. Instead, I stayed home, nursing a beer, stewing in my own frustration. The idea of leaving her was there, looming, but for some reason, I hadn't acted on it yet. Maybe it was the years together, the shared history, or maybe I was just being a coward, afraid to make the first move. One night, after she'd gone out yet again, I decided I couldn't just sit there anymore. I needed to talk to someone who wasn't going to feed me some feel-good crap about relationships. So, I texted my buddy, Sam. We've known each other since college, and he's the one guy I can count on to give it to me straight, no BS. We agreed to meet at our usual bar, one of those dive joints with sticky floors, a pool table in the back, and dim lighting. It wasn't fancy, but it was our spot. I walked in, spotting him at the bar already nursing a drink. Sam was the kind of guy who always had a half smirk on his face, like he knew something you didn't. He wasn't married, never really believed in it, so I wasn't sure how he'd take all this. I sat down next to him, ordered a whiskey, and let out a deep sigh. "What's going on, man?" "You look like shit," he said, without even glancing my way. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I just told him everything, how Lisa had dropped the open relationship bomb on me, how she was going on dates with other guys, and how I felt completely stuck. Sam listened, nodding here and there, his smirk slowly fading as the story unfolded. When I finally finished, he looked at me for a second, then said, "Man, you need to get the hell out of that marriage. She's walking all over you. Divorce her, take half of everything, and move on." I knew he'd say something like that. It's what I wanted to hear, honestly. But then he paused, took a sip of his drink, and added, "But, before you do that, why don't you make things a little interesting?" I raised an eyebrow, not sure what he meant. "You want to get back at her, right?" Sam leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "Well, you can't just roll over and let her have all the fun. Why don't you go out, pick up someone yourself, and bring her home tonight? Show Lisa what it feels like to be on the other side." I blinked, surprised at how casually he suggested it. "You mean, just bring a girl home? Like some kind of revenge?" He shrugged, that smirk creeping back onto his face. "Why not? She's already made it clear she doesn't give a damn about your marriage anymore. You want to leave? Fine, but before you go, make her feel what you've been feeling. She's out there, doing whatever the hell she wants, and you're just sitting at home like some kind of chump. Take advantage of the situation. Hit her where it hurts." At first, I shook my head. "I don't know, man. That feels wrong, like lowering myself to her level." Sam chuckled, finishing off his drink. "Wrong? Come on, Mark, what's wrong is letting her walk all over you while she's out banging other dudes. Look, you don't have to do anything crazy. Just go out, have some fun, and show her she's not the only one who can play this game." I sat there, swirling the whiskey in my glass, the idea bouncing around in my head. It was insane. Completely out of character for me. But at the same time, the thought of getting even, of seeing the look on her face when I walked in with another woman, that was tempting. Maybe Sam had a point. Why should I sit at home, feeling miserable, while she was out, exploring her freedom? If she wanted an open relationship, then maybe it was time to show her what that really looked like. I sighed, finally downing the rest of my drink. "All right, screw it. Let's do this." Sam grinned wide. "Now you're talking. Let's hit up the club and find you someone." We left the bar and headed downtown, straight to one of the nightclubs we used to hit up back in the day. It wasn't exactly my scene anymore, but tonight wasn't about that. It was about making a point, about taking back some control. The place was packed, the music loud, and the lights flashing in every direction. It felt like another world, far removed from the quiet misery of my marriage. Sam led the way, grabbing drinks and scanning the crowd like he was hunting for a prize. At first, I felt out of place, but after a couple of shots, I loosened up. I mean, why not, right? Lisa was out doing her thing. It was time I did mine. So, after Sam and I got to the club, things escalated quickly. The place was packed, bodies moving to the bass-heavy music, lights flashing in a haze of neon. I hadn't been to a club like this in years, and it felt like a different world, like I'd left all the crap with Lisa back home and stepped into a place where none of that mattered. I wasn't thinking about the past decade of marriage or her open relationship crap. All I wanted to do was forget, even if just for a night. Sam and I hit the bar first, knocking back a couple of shots. Tequila, whiskey, whatever was in front of us. It didn't take long for the alcohol to start working its magic. The frustration, the anger, the feeling of being played, they all started to melt away. And then, she walked in. She was stunning. I mean, the kind of woman you notice even in a crowded, dark, and sweaty club. Tall, brunette, a tight dress that hugged her curves just right. I watched her for a while, trying to find an excuse to approach her, but after a few more drinks, I didn't need one. I made my way through the crowd and leaned in with some half-sober line I don't even remember now. But it didn't matter. She smiled back at me, and that was all I needed. We started dancing. At first, it was just casual, like two strangers having fun. But the more we drank, the closer we got. Her hands were on my chest, my arms wrapped around her waist, and suddenly, it was like no one else in the club existed. Everything blurred together, the music, the lights, the people, and I didn't care about anything except being with her in that moment. Before I knew it, we were making out, and I was feeling more alive than I had in months. It was reckless, messy, but I didn't give a damn. She pulled me in closer, and I could feel the heat between us building. One thing led to another, and soon we were slipping away from the dance floor, weaving through the crowd toward the back of the club. We stumbled into the men's room, laughing like a couple of teenagers sneaking around. The second we were inside, she pushed me against the wall, kissing me hard, and I couldn't think about anything else. We didn't waste any time. I mean, we were in a freaking club bathroom. It wasn't exactly a place for romance. But it didn't matter. I was lost in the moment, in her, and we just went for it. Right there. When it was over, we stood there for a minute, catching our breath, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. She looked at me with a satisfied grin, fixing her hair in the mirror. And that's when something hit me, an idea that, in my drunk and angry state, seemed like the perfect way to get back at Lisa. I turned to her, leaning against the sink, and said, "You know, my wife just asked for an open relationship." Her eyes widened, and she raised an eyebrow. "Wait, you're married?" I nodded, smirking a little. "Yeah, but that's not the interesting part." She suggested we start seeing other people, and I didn't really give her an answer. But now I've got an idea. She seemed intrigued, her interest piqued, though I could tell she was still processing the fact that I was married. "What's the idea?" she asked, crossing her arms, leaning against the counter like she wasn't sure whether to laugh or be curious. I took a deep breath, the alcohol giving me more confidence than I probably should have had. "Come back to my place. Let's have sex again, but this time, in front of her." For a second, she just stared at me like she wasn't sure if I was serious or completely insane. But then, to my surprise, a slow smile spread across her face. "You want to have sex with me, in front of your wife, to get back at her?" "Yeah," I said, feeling a rush of adrenaline just thinking about it. She's been going out, doing her own thing, and I'm supposed to be fine with it. So why not show her what it feels like? You're beautiful, and I'm sure she'd hate it. It's the perfect revenge. She laughed, shaking her head, clearly amused by the whole thing. Well, that's a first. I've never been asked to help someone get revenge on their wife before. I shrugged, grinning. There's a first time for everything, right? She thought about it for a moment, then downed the rest of her drink, her decision made. All right, let's do it. Sounds like fun. And just like that, the plan was set. I didn't even think twice about what I was doing, about the consequences, or how this might blow up in my face. All I cared about was getting back at Lisa, making her feel the humiliation she'd been putting me through. We left the club together, heading back to my place. The whole way there, I kept imagining Lisa's face when she'd see us. Part of me couldn't believe I was actually doing this, but the other part, the angry, bitter part, wanted this more than anything. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about taking control of something in my life for once. And tonight, that control was going to be mine. We got home late, stumbling through the front door, the buzz of alcohol and adrenaline still pulsing through my veins. My heart was racing, not just from what had happened at the club, but from what was about to go down. The house was dark and quiet. Lisa was already asleep, or so I thought. I had no idea how the night would unfold, but I wasn't backing down now. The girl I'd met, her name was Julia, followed me inside. She had this confident look about her, like this whole situation was some kind of wild adventure for her. We didn't waste any time. We made our way to the living room, and without a second thought, we were on the couch, tangled up in each other again. My mind wasn't on anything else but that moment, fueled by anger, lust, and a deep desire for revenge. Then I heard it, a noise from upstairs. A door creaking open, footsteps. Lisa. She was coming down the stairs. At first, I thought maybe I could play it cool, pretend like nothing was going on. But when she reached the bottom of the stairs and saw us, her face said everything. She froze, her eyes wide with shock. I could see the horror, the disbelief in her expression, and for a split second, I almost felt bad. Almost. "What the hell is going on?" she shouted, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. I didn't stop. Neither of us did. Julia kept going, and I just stared at Lisa, feeling the rush of satisfaction wash over me. Lisa's face twisted in anger, and she took a step toward us, like she was going to try to physically pull us apart. But I raised my hand, palm out, stopping her dead in her tracks. "Free relationship," I said, my voice calm but dripping with sarcasm. "I'm sorry, but isn't this what you wanted?" Lisa's face went pale. Her mouth opened like she wanted to scream, but no sound came out at first. She looked like she was about to say something, but instead, she just stood there, staring at me with a mixture of rage and disbelief. For a moment, I thought she might actually hit me, but then she turned and stormed back upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her. And that was it. The moment I'd been waiting for, the revenge I never thought I'd go through with, was happening right in front of me. The rest of the night was a blur of passion and intensity, unlike anything I'd felt in years. It was reckless, sure, but in that moment, it was everything I needed. Julia and I didn't stop. We continued, right there on the couch, no holds barred. It was insane, chaotic, probably the craziest night of my life. And somehow, it was also the best. When the sun started to creep through the blinds, I felt a weird sense of calm wash over me. Julia got dressed, gave me a playful smile, and handed me her phone number. "In case you ever need a repeat performance," she said with a wink before walking out the door, leaving me standing there in the living room. I looked at the number in my hand, and for the first time in weeks, I felt free. Like I'd finally taken back some control. But there was one last thing I needed to do. I walked upstairs to our bedroom, where Lisa had locked herself away all night. I opened the door to find her sitting on the bed, her eyes red from crying, her face hardened with anger and humiliation. She didn't even look at me as I stepped inside. I stood there for a moment, taking in the scene. This was the woman I'd spent a decade with, the woman I thought I'd grow old with. But now, looking at her, all I saw was someone I no longer recognized. "I'm filing for divorce," I said, my voice steady and cold. Lisa didn't flinch. She didn't argue or plead. Instead, she just nodded, her lips tightening into a thin line. "Good," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm happy to agree to that." There was no fight left between us. No more words to say. I turned around and left the room without looking back, the weight of the last 10 years suddenly feeling lighter. It was over. And I couldn't have been more ready to start fresh. The next morning, after the storm that was the previous night, I sat at the kitchen table, nursing a hangover and trying to wrap my head around everything that had just happened. The divorce, the crazy revenge, the fact that I'd just blown up my life in the span of a few hours. But despite all that, one thing kept coming back to me, Julia. She had left her number, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. About her. I don't know why, but after staring at my phone for what felt like forever, I decided to dial her number. Maybe I needed to feel some kind of normalcy after everything that had gone down. Maybe I just needed to see her again, to talk without the madness of last night looming over us. I don't know. But I dialed, and she picked up after a couple of rings. "Hey, it's Mark," I said, suddenly feeling awkward as hell. "From last night." There was a brief pause, and I could almost hear the smirk in her voice. "Yeah, I remember," she said, sounding amused but also a little hesitant. "What's up?" I was wondering if you wanted to grab coffee or something," I said, running my hand through my hair. "You know, actually talk. Without, everything else." She laughed softly. "Coffee, huh? After last night? That's a bit of a change of pace." "Yeah, well," I muttered, feeling the embarrassment creeping in. "Last night was something else. Figured we could talk like normal people for a change." There was a moment of silence before she answered. "Okay. Coffee sounds good." We met up at a small cafe not too far from my place, somewhere neutral, where the insanity of the last 24 hours could feel distant, like it hadn't actually happened. When I saw her walk in, I couldn't help but feel a little weird about it all. I mean, we'd hooked up in a club bathroom and then had sex in front of my wife. That wasn't exactly a typical first encounter. But now, here we were, sitting across from each other, both of us a little awkward and unsure of what to say. At first, we didn't talk much. We were both kind of embarrassed, trying to avoid eye contact and pretending to care more about the coffee than the giant elephant in the room. Finally, Julia broke the silence. "So, that was an interesting night," she said, giving me a small, almost sheepish smile. I nodded, chuckling awkwardly. "Yeah, that's one way to put it. I'm not usually that guy, you know." "Neither am I," she said quickly, taking a sip of her coffee. "Honestly, I wasn't even supposed to be there. I just kind of ended up at the club by accident." "By accident?" I raised an eyebrow, curious now. She sighed, leaning back in her chair. "Yeah, my boyfriend, well, ex-boyfriend now, dumped me a few days ago. We'd been together for a while, and out of nowhere, he just tells me he's moving to a different city and doesn't want to do the whole long-distance thing. So I went to the club to blow off some steam, clear my head. And then, well, you know the rest. I wasn't expecting that. I guess I just assumed she was there for a good time, but hearing her story made me feel a bit guilty for what we'd done. It wasn't just a crazy night for her, it was an escape, something to distract her from her own pain. In a way, we were both trying to get away from the messes in our lives. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, genuinely meaning it. "That's rough. Breakups, they suck." She smiled a little at that, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yeah, they do." I wasn't sure how to steer the conversation from there, but I figured it was time to come clean about my side of things. "I told Lisa I'm filing for divorce," I said, watching her expression closely. Her eyes widened slightly. "Really? That was quick." "Yeah, I guess last night was the final straw," I said, running a hand through my hair again. I couldn't keep doing it anymore. She's been going out, seeing other guys. I don't know why I let it drag on as long as I did. But after what I did, I realized there's no going back. It's over. She nodded slowly, processing what I'd just told her. That sounds complicated. Yeah, that's one way to put it, I said, echoing her words from earlier. It's a mess, honestly. We were together for 10 years, and then one day, she drops the open relationship thing on me like it's normal. I guess I should have seen the signs, but I didn't. And now, well, here we are. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us lost in our own thoughts. I didn't know what I expected from this coffee meeting, but I hadn't anticipated feeling this strange sense of connection to her. She wasn't just some random girl from the club anymore. She had her own story, her own pain, and somehow, we'd crossed paths at just the right, or wrong, moment. I could feel something growing inside me, some kind of sympathy, or maybe even something more, but I was too afraid to say it out loud. I didn't know how to navigate this. I didn't even know if I wanted to. Part of me was still in shock from everything that had happened, and the other part of me was scared to admit that I might actually want to see where this went with Julia. But I kept it to myself, sipping my coffee and stealing glances at her, wondering if she felt the same. The divorce process is almost over now, and I can't even begin to describe the relief I feel. It's like this huge weight I've been carrying around for years is finally lifting off my shoulders. Lisa and we were done long before she suggested the open relationship. I think I knew it deep down, but I was too stuck in the routine of it all to admit it. Now that it's nearly over, I can finally breathe again. I can finally focus on the things that actually matter, like building something real with someone new. Speaking of, Julia and I have gotten pretty close since that wild night. And by close, I mean we've been living together for a little while now. Yeah, I know it's fast, but sometimes things just happen that way. After everything that went down, it just felt right. We both came from places of hurt, both needed someone to lean on, and somehow we've ended up building something good out of all the chaos. It hasn't been all smooth sailing, though. Lisa, being the person she is, tried to mess things up for us. At first, she acted like she didn't care about the divorce, like she was glad to be rid of me. But when she found out I was with Julia, she went off the rails a bit. Tried to spread rumors about us, said some nasty things behind my back, even showed up at my place a couple of times, causing a scene. I think it finally hit her that I was moving on, and she couldn't handle it. But here's the thing, none of it worked. Julia didn't let Lisa's antics get to her, and honestly, neither did I. We're too solid for that kind of drama. I think that just made Lisa angrier. From what I've heard, she's been throwing herself into casual relationships, hopping from guy to guy, like she's trying to prove something. Every few weeks, there's a new guy on her arm. I get it, she's searching for something to fill the void. But the way she's going about it, I don't see it ending well for her. It's not my problem anymore, though. I'm out, and that's all that matters. Anyway, I wanted to thank all of you who've followed along with this story and supported me. It's been a crazy ride, and I didn't expect to find so much comfort in sharing all of this. Your comments, advice, and encouragement helped me get through some of the toughest moments of my life, and for that, I'm grateful. As for the future, I'm excited. Julia and I are in a good place, and for the first time in a long time, I'm actually looking forward to what comes next. That being said, I'm always open to advice. Life can be unpredictable, as I've learned all too well, so if anyone has any tips for navigating a fresh start after a messy divorce, I'm all ears. Thanks again, everyone. Here's to new beginnings, better relationships, and hopefully a drama-free future. Wish me luck. Update. It's been 2 years since my last update, and I thought it was time to check back in. A lot has changed since then, and for once, I can actually say things are going really well. Life's taken some unexpected turns, but this time, in the best possible way. First off, Julia and I got married about a year ago. It was a small, intimate ceremony, nothing over the top, just close friends and family. Honestly, after everything that happened with my previous marriage, it felt amazing to start fresh with someone who truly understands me. And here's the big news, we're expecting a daughter. She's due in a couple of months, and I'm already over the moon about it. I never thought I'd be this excited to become a dad, but here we are, getting ready to start a family. It feels surreal. On top of that, I've been keeping busy with a small business I started. I've always had a bit of an entrepreneurial itch, and after the divorce, I figured it was the perfect time to give it a shot. It's nothing huge, just a little home renovation company. We focus on kitchen and bathroom remodels, and I've got a small crew helping me out. Business is steady, and it's honestly been a great way to channel my energy into something productive. I love the hands-on work, and being my own boss has been more fulfilling than I ever imagined. Now, as for my ex, you all probably remember what I said a while back, that her lifestyle wasn't going to end well. Well, turns out, I was right. From what I've heard, Lisa's been dealing with some pretty serious consequences. Word around town is she caught something, a venereal disease that's tough to treat. It's not the kind of thing you wish on anyone, but it looks like all those casual relationships caught up with her. And there's been some bad rumors about her too, you know, the kind that spread fast in small towns. People talk, and from what I hear, it's not been easy for her. Don't get me wrong, I'm not celebrating her downfall or anything like that. I'm not the type to find joy in someone else's misery. But in a way, it feels like everyone ended up where they were supposed to. I got my fresh start, and she's dealing with the consequences of her choices. Life has a funny way of evening things out, I guess. Anyway, I just wanted to give a quick update and thank you all again for sticking with me through this crazy journey. Your support meant more than you know, and I appreciate everyone who took the time to listen and offer advice. Here's to the future and whatever it brings. Take care, and thanks for all the attention.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
Kathy's lawyer stood up, his voice measured and practiced. Your Honor, my client wishes to request a counseling session in an effort to repair the marriage. She believes that with the right support, this relationship can be mended. My lawyer stood immediately, his voice confident and unwavering. Your Honor, Mr. Porter has made it clear that he does not wish to reconcile. The facts of this case speak for themselves. Mrs. Porter has engaged in multiple extramarital affairs and is currently pregnant with a child fathered by one of these individuals. My client's intention is to move forward with the divorce. There was a murmur in the courtroom, whispers that seemed to echo my own disbelief at how this had unfolded. I clenched my hands together, keeping my expression neutral. I needed to stay strong. Kathy's lawyer pushed on, though there was a hint of desperation in his tone now. While my client acknowledges past mistakes, she believes that a counseling session could bring closure and understanding to both parties, possibly healing some of the damage. I felt a surge of frustration. I leaned forward slightly, my voice steady but firm. Your Honor, I appreciate the court's time, but I have no interest in counseling. Too much has happened, and this marriage is beyond saving. I just want the divorce. Kathy's lawyer glanced at his notes before addressing the judge again. Your Honor, beyond the marriage itself, there is also the welfare of the unborn child to consider. My client believes that counseling is essential for ensuring that all parties, especially the child, have a chance at stability and support. My lawyer shifted slightly but stayed silent, waiting for my cue. I couldn't keep my frustration contained any longer. I stood, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. I have no interest in raising that devil spawn that isn't mine. That cheating 304 can find her father and let him raise it. I don't want to attend any counseling with that woman. Mr. Porter, one more word and I will hold you in contempt of court, he yelled at me. A quiet gasp moved through the room, and I caught a glimpse of Kathy's face, pale and tight-lipped. The judge's eyes narrowed as he looked at me over the rim of his glasses, a long pause filling the space as if he were weighing every word. Mr. Porter, the judge said, his voice firm, while I understand your feelings, this court must consider all factors, including the emotional welfare of everyone involved. I am ordering both parties to attend counseling sessions as a final attempt to address these issues constructively. I will not attend, I scowled. I am ordering 1 month of counseling 2 sessions per week. You will attend, Mr. Porter, or else. He glowered at me for a moment, then banged his gavel again, that is all. A week later, the room was silent, tense, with an air that seemed to buzz with unspoken words. The counselor, a middle-aged man with a calm demeanor and glasses perched on the edge of his nose, sat across from us, hands resting lightly on a notepad. Kathy sat next to me, looking down, twisting the fabric of her sweater nervously. "Ben," Kathy started, her voice shaky. "I just want to say—" "Don't," I snapped, my voice cold and sharp. "Keep your mouth shut. I don't want to hear anything from you." The counselor, Mr. Hensley, glanced between us, his expression neutral but attentive. "Ben, I know this is tough, but we're here to try to open a dialogue. Even if it's uncomfortable, speaking up can help us move forward. Will you give it a try?" I crossed my arms, my jaw tightening. "I'm here because the judge ordered it, not because I want to talk. I'll attend, but I don't have to participate." A brief silence followed, Mr. Hensley's eyes searching mine for any sign of willingness. When none came, he sighed, shifting his notepad slightly. "I understand this is painful, but communication is a step toward understanding, even if it doesn't lead to reconciliation." After an hour, "Okay, doctor, good session. See you Thursday?" "I'm canceling the sessions and sending my report to the judge." "Even better." I left the office. The judge was not pleased. "Give me one reason why I should not hold your client in contempt," he growled at my lawyer. "Your Honor, you ordered my client to attend the sessions. He attended the first session in accordance with the order. It was the counselor who called off the rest of the session. The counselor's report clearly states that he made no attempt to engage in the session. He put in headphones and ignored them for the entire time." The judge responded. "The order was that he attend," my lawyer returned. "He attended. Given that the counselor felt that there was no benefit in continuing, I would like to request that you grant the divorce according to the petition." "Not on your life." The judge said, "I am ordering 4 weeks of counseling. Mr. Porter will attend, and he will participate." The office was set up in exactly the same format as before when I arrived. 2 chairs about a foot apart faced the doctor's desk. He sat behind it. The desk was bare, barring a yellow legal pad and a picture of a pretty woman I would guess in her mid-30s, and a child that looked about 6 years old. "Mr. Porter," the doctor said, "please, take a seat." Once again, I started to move the chair. Kathy put her hand out to stop me and I jumped back. "If you dare to touch me, I would consider it an assault and would punch your teeth in your stomach. You understand, bitch?" Kathy gasped, pulling back. I went back to moving the chair and then sat in it. Once again I got out my phone. "Mr. Porter, the judge ordered that you participate in the session." "I know," I said, my voice steady. "I'm using my phone to record the session to prove my participation." My lawyer mentioned that some counselors might have their own agendas. "Since my soon-to-be ex-wife has already been seeing you for some time, I feel you may have developed a relationship with her that could work against me." The counselor, Mr. Hensley, tilted his head slightly. "And what if I do not wish you to record the sessions?" he asked, his tone calm but direct. "Then I'll go back to court and request a different counselor," I replied firmly. "I have that option. The only reason I didn't do that already was to avoid more delays. I just want to quickly get rid of this 304. Mr. Hensley turned his attention to Kathy, who was sitting with her arms crossed, eyes averted. "Kathy, how do you feel about the sessions being recorded?" She shrugged, barely looking up. "Whatever," she said with a hint of impatience, waving her hand dismissively. "Can we just start?" The air in the room seemed to settle, a reluctant agreement hanging between us all. "Okay then," Mr. Hensley said, folding his hands in front of him. "What I would like to do to start—" "Before we start," I interrupted, my tone cold, "can I ask a question?" "Of course," he said, his voice measured. "You can ask questions at any time. I may ask you to hold off during certain points, but right now, go ahead." He offered a small smile that I didn't return. "Have you slept with her yet?" I asked bluntly. Kathy gasped, a sharp intake of breath that cut through the room, but Mr. Hensley's expression didn't change. "No, Ben," he said evenly, "Kathy and I have not had, nor will we have, any kind of sexual contact. It would be highly inappropriate, even if I were not already very happily married. Does that answer your question?" I looked at him for a long moment before nodding. I believed him, despite the fact that Kathy seemed to have been involved with nearly every man she'd encountered in the past year. "All right then," Mr. Hensley continued smoothly. "As I was saying, to begin, I'd like to set our expectations. Since I have already spoken to Kathy on a few occasions, I would like her to outline what she hopes to achieve in these sessions and what her desired outcome would be. Ben, I'd ask that while she's talking, you refrain from comments or questions until the end. Once Kathy has shared her goals, I'll ask you to do the same. My goal is to see her get an incurable STD and watch her die a slow and painful death, to go to her grave and piss on it. That is the ultimate dream that I have. Mr. Hensley shook his head and looked towards Kathy, who was already shaken by my response. Talk to me, Kathy, Mr. Hensley said, his tone gentle. Tell me what you would like Ben to hear. Kathy took a shaky breath, her voice wavering as she began. I want him to hear how sorry I am for hurting him. I know what I did was wrong, but it was just that he spent so much time at work and on his business trips, and I was lonely. I realize how much pain I caused him, and if I could go back and change the past, I would do anything to make it right. I love him more than anything else in the world. I know we can get past this if he'd just give me a chance. I would show him that I can be the best wife a man could ever want. We could raise this child together, give him a wonderful life, maybe even a sibling. I want us to be a family again. I know we can make it through this. Mr. Hensley offered a small nod and a faint, supportive smile. Thank you, Kathy. Now, Ben, what would you like to say? She can write down her feelings on a piece of paper, then roll it in and stick it up her butt, far enough to choke on it. He feelings mean crap to me, and she is already dead to me. Kathy started to cry and ran out of the room. Please collide with something and die, I said as she ran out. That was not helpful, Mr. Hensley remarked, his voice steady but edged with concern. I don't want to be helpful, I spat back. That lying, cheating woman slept with half the city for a year, got herself pregnant, and then tried to pass the baby off as mine. If I hadn't already been suspicious and demanded a DNA test, I'd be stuck right now paying for someone else's kid. Tell me, doctor, how exactly should I be acting? It's natural to be angry, Ben, Mr. Hensley replied evenly, but you need to look past the anger to remember what you shared. I glared at him, my rage simmering. Do you even know what the hell you're talking about? I snapped. Have you ever had the love of your life, the person you trusted with every piece of yourself, who you die to protect, betray you so completely that you question your own sanity? How can someone who says they love you hurt you so deeply that it pushes you to the brink of wanting to end it all? And did you notice she hasn't even once truly apologized for what she did? Not for screwing all those men, not for the endless lies, not for getting herself pregnant, and not even knowing who the father is. The only thing certain is that it wasn't the person who should have been giving her a child. Me. So don't sit there with your sanctimonious, and your book knowledge, telling me I need to move past my anger. Right now, my anger is the only thing keeping me going. Just let me get this cheating 304 out of my life, so I can try to rebuild from the wreckage she left behind. I stood up, eyes locked on Mr. Hensley. Does that count as participation? I snarled as I turned and walked out. I asked Kathy to allow us to have this session without her, Mr. Hensley said as I walked into his office the following week. I think we may be able to achieve more on a one-on-one basis to start. As long as this still counts towards the court-ordered counseling, I'm more than happy to be in the same room as that bitch, I replied, plopping down in a chair and setting an A4 envelope on my lap. Can we try to refrain from name-calling, please? It's not constructive and only gets in the way, he said, his tone calm. I'm not here to be constructive. I just want to get through these sessions and finally get that unfaithful person out of my life for good. I never wanted to be here. She's just hell-bent on causing me as much pain as possible. She doesn't want the divorce because the prenup leaves her with nothing, so she's trying to force me into taking her back. It's not happening. And what about the child? Mr. Hensley pressed. He's innocent. Surely, he shouldn't be punished for. I don't give a shit about that kid. By your logic, I should take in every stray that couldn't keep her legs closed and ended up pregnant. Those kids have nothing to do with me, and neither does this one. Why are you so set on believing there's only one outcome here? He asked, his voice steady. You clearly loved her deeply. That kind of feeling doesn't just vanish overnight. Your anger is masking it right now, but once it settles, and trust me, it will, you'll find there are still feelings you can build on. Feelings that could help restore your relationship, maybe even make it stronger. That stupid smile was back again, and I felt the urge to punch him. Time to give him a taste of his own medicine. I gestured toward the picture on his desk. You have a nice family, I said. Been married long? We're not here to discuss my personal life. 11 years, if my sources are correct. Childhood sweetheart, married right out of college. Waited to have kids, and then little Ethan came along. What is he, 9 now? That picture must have been taken a couple of years ago. How did you? He started to ask. But did you know your darling Cheryl has her own secrets? I continued. Did you know that when she says she's at Pilates class on Wednesdays while you're working, she's actually at the Motel 8 on Patterson, screwing her personal trainer? That is completely ridiculous, he stammered, but I could see he was shaken. He had gone very pale. Really? I said, pulling several photographs from the envelope and slapping them down on his desk one by one. They showed a pretty slender woman entering a hotel room with a young muscle-bound man, his arm wrapped around her waist as they gazed lovingly at each other. I then pulled out a DVD and slapped it down too. There's footage from inside the room if you want actual proof of what they were getting up to. It's pretty graphic, so I wouldn't watch it if I were you. I made that mistake when I got my PI report. Those images will haunt me for the rest of my life. He looked like he might be sick. Oh, and one more thing, I added, pulling out a DNA report from the envelope. No, he said quietly. Please God, no. It appears that the fitness instructor isn't the first. I guess he would be too young to have fathered Ethan, but whoever the father is, it isn't you, I said quietly. He stood up and bolted for what I assumed was a bathroom off his office. I could hear him retching violently. Now do you understand? I asked when he finally sank back into his chair, tears streaming down his face. He looked at me with dead eyes. Do you see the pain she caused me and why I need to get her out of my life? I pressed. He nodded, looking utterly defeated. Good, I said, smirking a little. Now there's just one more thing you need to know. His face drained of color as he looked at me with dread. There's more? He asked, sounding pitiful. It's all fake. I shot back. None of what I just showed you is true. As far as I know, your wife is as loving and faithful as you thought she was, and Ethan is your son. But the photos, he stammered. Photoshop, I replied grimly. Amazing what you can do with some Facebook posts and a little time and effort. If you had them examined by anyone with half a brain, they'd tell you they're all fakes. I pulled out the originals I'd created them from. The DVD? He asked, his voice trembling. Blank, I replied flatly. And the DNA report? Is actually the DNA report for that cheating 304's baby. I just changed the names and dates, I said, watching his expression shift from confusion to disbelief. He sat there, stunned, fresh tears beginning to stream down his face. Why would you do that? What did you think you could possibly achieve by wrecking my marriage and my life? He asked, his voice cracking. That was not my intention, I shot back. That's why I told you right away it was all fake. I never wanted you or your family to suffer permanent harm. I just wanted you, for once, to truly understand the pain I went through. The feelings of loss, anger, and hurt. You had a taste of it for a few minutes. I'm still living with it. Your brief misery is my daily reality now. Forcing me to sit here with that bitch, listening to her spout her shit about how she loves me and wants me back, just means I have to relive the pain over and over again. There are laws against cruel and unusual punishment. Why don't they apply here? I just want to move on, pick up the pieces of my life, and get on with it. Why can't you and the courts let me do that? I started gathering the documents from the table and shoved them back into the envelope. I'll leave this with you to dispose of, I said, my tone softening just a fraction. I am actually sorry to have had to do this, but I needed you to understand. Your Honor, I have the report from the court-mandated counseling that my client was instructed to attend, my lawyer said, addressing the judge with a mixture of formality and urgency. I have a copy, the judge growled, his eyes narrowing as he flipped through the pages. It appears that the counselor believes, even after only 3 sessions out of the mandated 8, that this marriage is beyond saving. For the well-being of all involved, including the child, the best course would be to allow its dissolution. Yes, Your Honor. I would request that you order the divorce be completed as per the petition, my lawyer pressed. The judge stared at me for a long moment. I kept my gaze fixed straight ahead, refusing to meet his eyes, not wanting to reveal the turmoil inside. So ordered, he said finally, banging his gavel with a finality that echoed in the courtroom. The judge glanced at the financial records before him and delivered his ruling with a tone that made it clear this was not a matter to be taken lightly. There will be no alimony, he stated, looking up at us. Ms. Kathy earns more than Mr. Porter, and both parties will retain their pre-marriage assets. The remainder will be divided 50-50. No alimony meant that I wouldn't be financially tethered to Kathy any longer. Kathy had lost her job, a fact that didn't surprise me in the least. One of her lovers had turned out to be a client, and I could only imagine the mess that would have ensued from that. I couldn't help but smirk internally at the irony of her situation. Then, as if it couldn't get any more ridiculous, I heard that she had filed a suit against 7 men, requesting the court to mandate DNA tests. I couldn't believe it. Here she was, dragging multiple men into the fray, all in an effort to sort out who the father of her child might be. The aftermath of the paternity test had set off a chain reaction that I couldn't have predicted. News spread like wildfire. All 7 wives of the men Kathy had been sleeping with filed for divorce against their husbands. I couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction at the chaos she'd unleashed on everyone involved. It was like a karmic whirlwind, and I was just a bystander, watching the fallout. Last I heard, one of those angry wives had stormed into the courthouse and attacked Kathy. The image of her breaking Kathy's nose was almost poetic in a way. After everything Kathy had done, seeing her face bloodied and bruised felt like some kind of cosmic justice. I had to admit, I almost laughed when I heard about it. It was hard to feel any sympathy for her at that point. She had turned my life upside down, and now she was reaping what she had sown. Kathy had given birth to her child, but that didn't change how I felt about her or the situation. The cases against those 7 men were still lingering in the courts, and I wondered how long it would take for all that to finally be resolved. Honestly, I was just glad to be out of the mess. Kathy showed up at my house unannounced one afternoon, her face set with a mixture of desperation and entitlement. I could tell from the moment she walked through the door that she was on a mission to convince me to marry her again. She started spouting all this nonsense about how she had changed, how she realized what a mistake she had made, and how much she loved me. It was almost laughable considering everything that had happened. I stood my ground, refusing to let her manipulate me again. Kathy, it's over. We're done. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them, I told her firmly, trying to keep my cool. But she wouldn't let it go. She was relentless, her voice rising with every word, trying to make me feel guilty for not considering a reconciliation. Just then, Nancy, my girlfriend, came out from the kitchen. She must have sensed the tension in the room because she didn't hesitate to confront Kathy. You need to leave. You're not welcome here, she said, her tone sharp and unyielding. Kathy's response was explosive. She launched into an abusive tirade, spewing venomous insults and trying to demean Nancy, clearly believing she still had the power to intimidate. I could see Nancy's eyes narrow as Kathy continued her verbal assault. I felt a surge of protectiveness for Nancy, but I knew Kathy was unhinged, and I didn't want to escalate the situation. Then it happened. In a moment of rage, Kathy lunged at Nancy, trying to hit her. That was a huge mistake. Nancy, who was no stranger to standing her ground, expertly sidestepped Kathy's wild swing and retaliated with a brutal counterattack. She kicked her and threw her on the floor. I stood there, half in shock and half in admiration, as Nancy quickly gained the upper hand. She was fierce, and Kathy, who had always relied on her manipulative tactics, was clearly outmatched. Before I knew it, Nancy had Kathy pinned against the floor, her anger palpable. It was surreal, watching Kathy, the woman who had once held so much control over my life, reduced to this. I could hardly believe what I was witnessing. Get the hell out of our lives, Kathy. You're not welcome here, Nancy shouted. In the midst of the chaos, I pulled out my phone and called the cops. Kathy was screaming by this point, but her words fell on deaf ears. The cops arrived shortly after, and Nancy calmly explained everything. They stepped in, quickly assessing the situation. Kathy, still defiant, tried to put on a show, claiming she was the victim, but it didn't take long for the officers to see through her act. As they handcuffed her and led her away, I felt an odd mix of emotions: relief, satisfaction, and a sense of finality. It was the end of an era for me, the last remnants of her toxicity being dragged out of my life. I turned to Nancy, who was still shaking with adrenaline. You were incredible, I said, feeling grateful to have her by my side. Just doing what had to be done, she replied with a hint of a smile. In that moment, I knew I had made the right choice. I was ready to leave the past behind and embrace a future with someone who truly valued me, someone who wouldn't try to tear me down. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.